My roommate Sylvia and I worked in the same business park, so it was only natural that she started catching rides with me. At first, it was just a convenient way to get to work, but eventually, she began treating me like her personal chauffeur. During a car accident, she was thrown from the vehicle because she wasn't wearing a seatbelt and was left permanently disabled. The Shin family held me entirely responsible for everything and pressured me to pay compensation. Faced with the exorbitant compensation, my parents sold our house. But it still wasn't enough. In the end, they worked themselves to death. After my parents died, the Shin family tried to force me to marry an old man in exchange for a bride price. Of course I refused. In the struggle, I fell from the balcony and died on the spot. When I opened my eyes again, I had gone back to the day I had just bought the car. Me, perfect. This means I won't have to squeeze onto the subway for work anymore. I can sleep in for at least 20 more minutes. Wait, 30. I can even do my makeup in the car. No more squeezing onto the subway, no more braving the wind and sun. This is fantastic. I finish work a few minutes later than you in the evening, so remember to wait for me, okay? I sat dazed at the dining table, listening to Sylvia's incessant chattering in my ear. My brow furrowed as I looked around the room. I'm not dead. No way. I couldn't have survived a fall from that height, which means I've been reborn. Not hearing my reply, Sylvia sounded a bit annoyed. Evelyn, I'm talking to you. Are you even listening? Don't tell me you've forgotten your old friend now that you've got a new car. I was still reeling from the shock and joy of my rebirth and couldn't get a word out. Then our other roommate, Maggie, chimed in. Sylvia, how could that be? Evelyn is so good to you, and you both work in the same business park. It's completely on her way. You're going to have it made from now on. You're practically a car owner yourself. The way she said it, you'd think the car I bought had somehow become Sylvia's. Sylvia was pleased by Maggie's comment and said with a laugh, True, we're all friends here. She wouldn't be that stingy, but since Evelyn got a new car, she should treat us to a meal first. Perfect timing with your paycheck. Let's go to Tingjing Buffet. I've been wanting to try that place forever. Maggie nodded eagerly. Yes, yes. I've heard that buffet is crazy expensive, like over 1,000 per person, but hey, everyone present gets a share of the spoils. Count me in. When Sylvia saw I still hadn't spoken, she waved her hand in front of my face. Evelyn, say something. When are we going? No time like the present. Let's go today. You can drive us. I still didn't respond, just kept eating my food. Sylvia and Maggie had already gotten up to go change their clothes, chattering about needing to look good for the photos. And here's the thing, these two were exactly the same in my past life, always playing off each other. I was such a fool, thinking that because we were friends and classmates, we should help each other out. But right now, listening to their voices, I could barely stop myself from grabbing a kitchen knife and chopping them both to pieces. The apartment we're living in now was bought for me by my parents, since our family's financial situation wasn't great. The place they got is a bit far from the city center. To ease the mortgage burden, I moved in with Sylvia and Maggie. However, I never told them the place was actually mine. I just said I was renting it. Living out here meant a long commute to work. I had to squeeze onto packed subways every day and even had to deal with gropers. My parents felt so bad for me that they scraped together some money to buy me a car, just for getting around. Little did I know, it was that very car that would tear my family apart. After I bought the car in my previous life, Sylvia started hitching rides with me, and I didn't see anything wrong with it. After all, we were friends and old classmates, and I was driving there anyway, so I agreed. It started as just the occasional ride, but gradually, I became Sylvia's personal chauffeur. One morning on the way to work, Sylvia wouldn't sit still and insisted on sticking her head out the window. I got distracted, causing an accident where she was thrown from the car and left permanently disabled. The matter ended up in court, where they gave me an ultimatum: either go to jail or pay up. To keep me out of prison, my parents sold our family home and this apartment to pay Sylvia in full. But she still wasn't satisfied. My parents, already advanced in years, had to go back to work, in poor health and under immense stress. They ultimately died from overwork. After my parents' death, the Shin family, driven by greed, tried to sell me off for a bride price, aiming to squeeze out the very last bit of value I had left. I flat out refused, which led to an argument with Sylvia. In the ensuing scuffle, she pushed me off the balcony to my death. 3. The two of them came out after changing, only to find me already full and packing up. Sylvia, barely containing her anger, said, What's going on? We agreed to go for the buffet, didn't we? Maggie glanced over and said with utter nonchalance. It's fine, if Evelyn doesn't want to eat, we'll just go without her, as long as Evelyn pays for it, that's all that matters. In this life, I refuse to be their puppet any longer, I have to get rid of both of them as soon as possible. I nodded too. Yeah, if you're hungry, go ahead. I'm not. Sylvia grabbed my arm, stopping me from heading to the kitchen. You might be full, but I'm not. You promised to treat us to the buffet. I've changed my clothes and put on makeup. You can't back out now. When did I say that? Weren't you two ganging up on me, pressuring me into it? Maggie was taken aback that I'd talk back. Recovering from her shock, she tried to smooth things over. Evelyn, you just bought a car. The least you could do is buy us a meal. What kind of friend refuses even a single dinner? Exactly. Asking you to treat us to a meal is our way of celebrating and sharing in your happiness. I nodded thoughtfully. You're right. In that case, let's not be friends anymore. You two should pack up and move out. I'll refund the remaining rent and your security deposit. Sylvia and Maggie were taken aback by my words. After all, the rent here was several hundred cheaper than other places. Hearing this, they started backpedaling with soft words, refusing to leave. Sylvia said with a grin, okay, no dinner then. Don't be mad, Evelyn. We'll just have instant noodles. Maggie said stiffly. I'm going by the contract. We signed a 2-year lease. So there's no way we're leaving now. If you have a problem with us, if you don't want to treat us to a nice meal, just say so. Don't keep threatening us with eviction, for yesterday ended on a sour note, while I couldn't kick them out directly. At least things could quiet down for a while, but the moment I opened my door, Sylvia suddenly popped up, beaming as if yesterday's incident never happened. Evelyn, are you ready? I'm all set, we can head out. I turned my head to look at her. There's no us in this. I'll go to work by myself, and you should do the same. Sylvia's voice was sharp, like a rooster's crow. Evelyn, do you think you're better than everyone just because you bought a car? We're friends. What's the big deal about giving me a ride? Friends are supposed to help each other out. If I hadn't agreed to split the rent with you, would I have rented a place so far away? You should be giving me a ride to work anyway, no matter what Sylvia said. I kept my mouth shut. Sylvia wasn't offended either and continued her one-woman show. Evelyn, you said we were best friends. What kind of best friend won't even give me a ride to work? It's not like I'm asking for a special trip. It's right on your way. You wouldn't even have to press the gas pedal a tiny bit harder. Why are you being so stingy? I nodded. That's right, I am stingy. If you're so generous, why don't you take a cab to work instead of trying to get a free ride? Or better yet, just buy my car from me. Sylvia took a deep breath. Back in school, I brought you so many local treats to eat. Did it all just go to waste? Sylvia's family ran a small convenience store. She would often bring over expired stuff and force us to eat it. I got diarrhea and gastritis more than once after eating that garbage. You forced that expired crap on us, and we never even called you out on it. And now you have the nerve to act all high and mighty. We're being more than generous by not suing you for damages. I'd called her out, and Sylvia was clearly embarrassed, but she still tried to play it off. It's not like I do it every day. I'm just sitting here today because I'm running late. If I give in once, it'll happen again and again. There's no way I'm agreeing to this. 5. Maggie, who also hadn't left yet, came out and said, exactly, we didn't even make you treat us last night. How can you not even do a simple favor? I looked at Maggie. Don't you have a car too? If you're so concerned, why don't you give her a ride yourself? Maggie took Sylvia's hand. Sylvia, I do have a car. But you know we work in completely opposite directions. If we were going the same way, I'd be happy to give you a lift even if it meant a slight detour. I'm not like some people. Maggie is lying. Perfect timing. I found out a few days ago that you changed jobs, Maggie, and your new workplace is only about 2 kilometers from us. Since you don't mind a small detour, you could give Sylvia a ride. Maggie's expression changed. How did you know that? She quickly realized she had slipped up. It's mainly that I'm not a confident driver. Taking on the responsibility of driving someone else is too much for me. I said the same thing in my past life. Back then, Maggie put it this way, Evelyn, if Sylvia is willing to ride with you, it means she trusts you. Why are you making all these excuses? Just drive carefully. That's all that matters. So I threw those exact words right back at Maggie. Sylvia just wanted a free ride. Whose car it was didn't matter to her at all. When she realized she was getting nowhere with me, she immediately turned and started begging Maggie instead. Maggie deeply regretted staying out so late just to watch the drama unfold. Cornered, and with no way out, she said, "Sylvia, don't ask me, it's Evelyn who's going your way, not me." I smiled and said, "Maggie, didn't you say you wouldn't mind going a little out of your way? We're friends, after all, you help when you can." Maggie was caught between a rock and a hard place. With time running out, she had no choice but to take Sylvia and head out the door. 6. But Maggie couldn't even keep it up for a full week before she'd had enough. She took annual leave, saying there was a family matter and she needed a week off. Before she left, she holed up in Sylvia's room, whispering for ages. I bet she was giving Sylvia tips on how to handle me. Sure enough, the next morning on my way to work, Sylvia planted herself right in front of my car. She wiped the hood and then plopped down on it, saying, "Either you give me a ride, or nobody's going anywhere today." I just pretended not to see her. I walked straight past and got into the driver's seat. I had a feeling, actually, with the morning rush of commuters coming and going, Sylvia, having eaten and drunk her fill, started shouting to the crowd, "Everyone, be the judge of this. The person sitting in that car is my best friend, my closest confidant. We work in the same business park. She bought a car, so I thought I'd help share the fuel costs and commute with her, but now she's complaining that what I'm offering is too little, saying, chartering a car isn't that cheap." Tell me, was I blind to have made a friend like this? The passers-by didn't know the full story, but playing the good guy with their words was always the easiest route. "Oh, come on now, young lady, don't be so stingy. Giving her a ride won't cost you an arm and a leg." Yeah. It's just sitting there empty anyway." I gave the older woman a faint smile. "Auntie, the money in the bank is just sitting there too. Why don't you go and take some? Since you're so kind-hearted, why not drive her to work? And if you have a spare room at home, you could let her stay there." The woman was so angry she was left speechless, but she couldn't think of a comeback either. Sylvia remained sitting on the hood of the car, not coming over at all. She was convinced I wouldn't actually be late and was just waiting for me to give in. Little did she know, I had already asked my boss for time off last night, not just today, but for the next few days. I could keep playing this game with Sylvia. 7. Watching the minutes tick by, Sylvia finally grew frantic. She couldn't help but pound on the car hood. "We're going to be late. Why aren't you leaving?" "I can't be late." Of course I knew Sylvia couldn't be late. Her boss absolutely hated tardiness. I pretended not to hear and just kept playing my game in the car. Sylvia kept staring at her phone, but finally gave up and ran out of the underground garage. After work that evening, Sylvia stormed into the house and threw my potted plant on the floor. "Evelyn, do you have any idea? I was late and got chewed out by the boss. I lost my perfect attendance bonus. And the cab ride all that way cost me a small fortune. You owe me that money, or I swear I won't let this go." I looked at the poor plant on the floor, heartbroken. "It cost me $5. Sylvia, I told you not to try and mooch a ride off me. You didn't listen, thinking you could just block my car and force my hand. You can keep this up. I'm letting you off easy today by not hitting you. If you dare pull this again tomorrow, I'll run you over with my car." Sylvia was acting like a complete lunatic at that moment. "Give me back my money. If you don't, I'll smash every single thing you own." I stepped aside and said, "Go ahead, smash it. I'll call the police, and then you'll have to buy me brand new replacements for everything. You didn't even manage to get your grubby hands on anything, and you still have the nerve to ask me for money. What's wrong with you? Are you out of your mind?" Sylvia picked up the skincare products from my desk. But after hearing that, she had no choice but to put them down. Still fuming, she threw my pillow onto the floor. Sylvia was so angry with me she was on the verge of tears. She took out her phone, tapped on it a few times, pointed at me, and said, "Just you wait, someone's going to put you in your place. I'm not scared." It wasn't long before a loud, insistent banging started at the door. I opened the door, and a shifty-looking man pushed past me and walked right in. This guy seemed to be Sylvia's boyfriend, Jason. The moment Jason was inside, he started yelling at me, "So you're the so-called Evelyn, huh?" I frowned at him, pulling my clothes tighter around myself. "Get out, now, or I'm calling the police." Hearing Jason's voice, she ran out from the bedroom and threw herself into his arms. "Honey, it's her. She's the reason I was late today. She looks down on me because I'm poor." Jason must have already known the whole story, gently patting Sylvia's back. He guided her to sit on the sofa before finally turning to me. The police. I'm here for my wife. What are you calling the cops for? My wife's been bullied. If I don't do something about it, what kind of man would I be? You cost my wife money by making her late. Pay up right now. 1,000 will do. From now on, my wife rides in your car. It's not for free. I'll give you 100 a month for gas. If you've got a problem with that, you'll regret it. I ignored him. Simply picked up my phone and started messaging a colleague to call the police. Seeing that I wasn't responding, Jason's anger flared up. He strode over, snatched my phone, and threw it. I'm talking to you. What the hell are you doing on your phone? You looking for a beating? Noticing I wasn't wearing much, Jason started toying with me, pulling at my clothes. Sylvia, far from being upset, even began filming the whole thing with her phone. However, the police officer at the door cut short Jason and Sylvia's plans. The police took one known back to the station, and Jason was detained for 15 days for causing trouble. 9. Not a few days later, Maggie returned. Sylvia tearfully told Maggie how I had made her late and how I had gotten her darling husband arrested by the police, causing Maggie's brow to furrow deeply. I know exactly what she's thinking. What an idiot. Can't even manage to get a free ride. The two of them started to gang up and freeze me out, all smiles and politeness. They even contacted the rental agency, saying they wanted to kick me out and rent the place themselves, but the agency didn't have the listing for this apartment, so they had no way to proceed. After learning about these things, I was worried they might try something against me, so I put a lock on my own bedroom door and installed a security camera. But these were just stopgap measures. The most important thing was that I had to find a way to get them out, so I approached them about raising the rent. Sylvia's boyfriend, who was still locked up and clearly held a grudge against me, said, "Raise the rent? Are you out of your mind? What, you bought a car and can't afford the gas, so now you're trying to squeeze money out of us?" I shot her a look. The rent for this place was already way below market rate for similar apartments. Now the landlord wants to raise it by 1,000. You have the master bedroom, so your share goes up by 400. Maggie and I are in the smaller rooms, so ours goes up by 300 each. What's so unreasonable about that? If you're not happy with it, you're free to move out. The landlord said he'll return your deposit, any prepaid rent, and pay the penalty as stipulated in the contract. Sylvia was ready to agree on the spot, but Maggie stopped her. The two of them disappeared into a bedroom to scheme for a long time. When they finally emerged, they agreed to the increase, but only if it was 200 each. Maggie waived the contract, arguing her point. 200 from each of us is more than fair. A sale doesn't break a lease. As long as we don't leave, nobody can legally kick us out. 10. Sylvia is simple-minded and just does whatever Maggie says. Their grand scheme, to go into our class group chat and start slinging mud at me. Evelyn used to be my best friend, but ever since she bought a car, she's become so stuck up and distant. We just wanted to go out for a casual buffet meal together, but she thought we were trying to take advantage of her. She flat out refused to go and even tried to kick us out of the shared apartment. I didn't dare ask for a ride from her either. I always commuted with Maggie. One time, I wasn't feeling well and got up a bit late. It was rush hour and hard to get a cab, so I thought I'd ask her for a lift. I even offered to pay. She actually refused and nearly ran me over with her car, which made me late for work. My boyfriend was only in the apartment for less than 10 minutes, and she called the police and had him arrested. Maggie also came forward to confirm that these statements are true. Hee, I wasn't even bothering you, and yet you come looking for trouble with me. Just because I don't care much about what others think, doesn't mean I enjoy being badmouthed behind my back like this. If you want to make a scene, I'll give you a show you won't forget. I went ahead and posted the receipts for all the meals Sylvia has mooched off me over the years, along with the video of her blocking my car that day. As for her so-called boyfriend, I just shared the police report. Sylvia, since you're so keen on not taking advantage of me, then spit out what you've eaten and pay back what you've used. After seeing this, the other classmates started blaming Sylvia one by one. Sylvia and Maggie quickly left the group chat. After that day, Sylvia, Maggie, and I were completely done. Before, they would just isolate me behind my back, but now they're openly going against me. For example, they would deliberately lock me out and pretend not to hear me knocking. I immediately called a locksmith, claiming someone might have committed suicide inside. After he opened the door, I had the lock replaced right away and didn't give them a key. They tried to pull the same stunt, but without proper proof. The locksmith refused to open the door for them, left with no choice. They had to pay me for the lock change to get a key. They deliberately used up all the cooking supplies I bought. I didn't sweat it. I just cut off the gas and made sure to eat at the office before coming home every day. They didn't know the account number, so they had no way to pay the bill and had to come ask me for it. I used to be a pushover and figured the gas bill wasn't much anyway, so I never asked them for the money. I just said that I don't need to cook anyway, so if they wanted to use the stove, they could pay for it themselves. But if they did, they'd have to settle all the money they owed me from before. Neither Sylvia nor Maggie was willing to pay, so the gas was just cut off for good. This went on for nearly a month. Sylvia didn't back down. Maggie, however, came to see me. She was standing at the door with a cake. "Evelyn, let's make up," she said. "All this business lately was really Sylvia's doing. I had no choice. Please, eat this cake and forgive me." I don't hold that much resentment towards Maggie, even though she made a lot of snide remarks in my past life. The one who truly hurt me was only ever Sylvia. I've been driving Sylvia to and from work every single day lately. She treats me like her personal chauffeur, and I just can't take it anymore. Can you help me out? I'll drive her on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and you take Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's on your way anyway, right? Besides, you and Sylvia were so close. You've been angry long enough. Surely you can let it go by now. I refused her cheap little cake offering. "Maggie, you were the one who volunteered to drive her. I'm not angry. And I won't be, but as for giving her a ride, that's something I absolutely cannot agree to." Maggie's expression shifted. "Having someone in the car could actually be good for you too. Driving alone with no one to talk to. What if you got into an accident?" I nodded. "Right, so if I took Sylvia from you, what if you got into a car accident? You'd better keep her." 12. Early the next morning, Sylvia and Maggie seemed to leave the house in high spirits. I found it even more suspicious. Before getting in the car, I decided to be cautious and walked a full circle around it. Suddenly, I noticed there were some extra footprints around the car. Something felt off. A sudden flash of insight hit me. It was just like the car accident in my previous life. Back then, Sylvia had even complained about the car being filthy, angrily wondering if a homeless person had relieved themselves nearby. Could it be? I didn't get in the car. Instead, I chose to call the police again. The reason is, I suspect someone deliberately vandalized my car. The police were very diligent and arrived quickly. They accompanied me to the property management office to review the security footage. Upon checking, we discovered that Maggie was indeed in the garage late last night, lurking suspiciously around my car and appearing to do something to the tire. We called a technician from the 4S dealership to inspect it. They said, "There's a small nail stuck in this tire. The nail wasn't pulled out, so it's actually plugging the leak, making it very difficult to detect initially. However, if you hit a bump and the nail falls out, it could start leaking. If you're driving too fast or the puncture widens, it could even lead to an accident." My face fell instantly. No wonder, in my past life, even though Sylvia distracted me by not wearing her seatbelt and sticking her head out, the road was perfectly clean. How could a tire have suddenly blown out, causing a crash? So that's the reason. The 4S shop employee's account was so dramatic that the police took it very seriously. They collected the nails for fingerprint analysis and also took copies of all the relevant surveillance footage. Maggie was just waiting to hear about my car crash. Instead, the police showed up at her office, took her in for questioning, and that's when it finally dawned on her that the game was up. 13. Despite her malicious intentions, Maggie was, after all, just a girl in her 20s. The police barely had to ask any questions before she confessed to everything. The reason is pretty much what Maggie told me last night. Since Sylvia started getting rides, she hasn't been taking care of the car. She puts on her makeup every day, and now there's foundation smeared all over the interior. It won't even come off, and every morning is a total drag. After dropping Sylvia off, she has to rush to her own office and doesn't even have time for breakfast. Then at night, she has to wait around for Sylvia to finish working overtime, starving to death. Even on weekends when she just wants to relax, Sylvia demands to go shopping, treating her like a personal chauffeur. The moment I voice the slightest complaint, Sylvia starts wailing and carrying on, saying it was Maggie who agreed to it, and that if Maggie hadn't, she'd be hitching a ride with me instead. So Sylvia was forced to come up with a harebrained scheme. She thought if I got into a minor accident, I'd realize the benefit of having someone ride along. which could help her offload the burden of Sylvia's freeloading. Even if I still refused to share the load, at least she could vent her frustration. The officer couldn't help but ask, "What would you do if Evelyn died in the car accident?" Only then did Maggie feel a pang of fear, lowering her head and not daring to speak. But I knew what she was thinking was, then she'd just have to accept her own bad luck. In our previous life, we were in a car accident that left Sylvia disabled. She completely took Sylvia's side, saying things like, "If you can't handle the job, don't take it on." Sylvia and I were going the same way anyway. "If you weren't up to it, you should have told me. I could have driven." Why did you have to cause Sylvia to become disabled? 14. Because the evidence of Maggie's crime was clear and I refused to mediate. She was sentenced to 1 year in prison. What happened with Maggie made me realize that with some people, hiding from them is useless. You have to fight back. When Sylvia found out Maggie had gone to prison, she showed no sympathy. Instead, she made a snide remark, "You got lucky this time. It should have been you in that car crash, to teach you a lesson for showing off." I just stared coldly at Sylvia. If you hadn't been freeloading rides off her, she never would have done something like this. "You're just sitting pretty, acting like it's none of your business," Sylvia scoffed. "In the end, it's your fault. If you had just agreed to give me a ride to and from work, she wouldn't have had to. If she didn't have to drive me, she wouldn't have gotten all these ideas. Who knew someone who seemed so nice could be so malicious? All I did was catch a few rides, and this is what happens. I'm here all alone, working in a different city. They say when you're away from home, you rely on friends. What kind of unreliable friend are you?" I knew exactly how thick-skinned Sylvia was. I understood that she would never get it, no matter what I said. She just thinks the whole world should revolve around her and that everyone owes her kindness. It's true what they say about relying on friends when you're away from home. But you're only thinking about leaning on me. Why don't you ever think about being someone others can lean on? You're alone in a new city, but am I not alone too? I stared at Sylvia and didn't say another word. My stare made Sylvia a little uneasy, and she was at a loss for how to argue back. Just to spite me, she started exploiting a loophole in the rental agreement, which clearly stated that no male guests were allowed to stay overnight. So she started inviting her boyfriend over every day to eat and watch TV. However, after the last incident with the police, the two of them seemed to behave themselves. Aside from their sarcastic remarks aimed at me, they didn't break any other rules. I couldn't call the police over every little thing. After all, the police have more serious matters to deal with, and I shouldn't overuse their resources. All I could do was lock the door whenever I went out and set up a surveillance camera in a discreet corner. I wanted to see if I could find anything, and also to protect myself. 15. Because I deliberately locked the door in front of Sylvia and Jason every day, I successfully piqued their curiosity. "What's with you always locking the door? Are you worried I'll steal your stuff?" I didn't deny it. Instead, I nodded and said, "Yeah, I have valuables in my bedroom, so I have to be careful." When I got home from work that day, I noticed my bedroom door was open. Instead of going in, I called out to Sylvia in the living room, "Did you go into my room?" Sylvia scoffed, "Don't try to pin this on me just because you forgot to close your own door. Go ahead, call the police, have them check for fingerprints, see if you can find any proof I was in there." She looked at me with absolute confidence. Clearly, there wouldn't be any fingerprint evidence. After closing the door, I started reviewing the security footage. Sylvia and Jason did indeed enter my room. They didn't touch anything, just muttered, "Why bother locking this dump? There's nothing in here anyway." Jason chuckled, "Don't you know, some women are just overly sensitive, thinking every man is into them. She's probably afraid I'd try something. As if, I have you, why would I even look at her?" This remark greatly pleased Sylvia. Sylvia nodded, "Exactly, Evelyn hasn't even been in a relationship before." "How boring is that?" Jason's expression shifted when he heard she'd never been in a relationship. "So she's still a virgin then?" Sylvia was furious and made a move to hit Jason. He quickly explained, "You've got me all wrong. What I meant was, we can use her. Her family's well off. We can figure out a way to get her under our control. That way, we can get our hands on her money. Once we do, forget just driving you to and from work. She'd be on her knees washing your feet if we told her to." Sylvia stopped. "Go on, let's hear this brilliant plan of yours." Jason pulled Sylvia out of the room. After that, their voices dropped so low they became almost inaudible, but I could faintly hear something about drugs and addiction. 16. I started to be more careful. Jason is a social loafer and is likely exposed to a lot of bad stuff. I'm worried that the drugs and addiction they were talking about that day might be related to things like prostitution, gambling, or drugs. I'm hesitating about whether to call the police again and have them investigate properly. After all, reporting illegal activities like prostitution, gambling, and drugs is every citizen's duty. But Sylvia was the one who brought up moving out first. Evelyn, she said, I'm planning to move in with my boyfriend, so I won't be sharing the apartment with you anymore. You said before that if I break the lease, I get my deposit and any penalty fees back. Anyway, you don't want to live with me either. So just hand over the money. I couldn't have been happier to hear that. I promptly got the money and sent Sylvia on her way. Sylvia wasn't kidding, she started packing up right away, but she moved at a snail's pace, taking a quilt one day, a wash basin the next. I had to remind her to hurry up several times. She only left, and quite reluctantly at that, after I told her that someone else would be moving in soon. Looking at the messy and empty room, I finally felt a sense of relief and started tidying up. Even though Sylvia had returned the key, I didn't trust her. I had to change the lock. Not only that, but I also planned to find a way to sell this apartment. Ever since my rebirth, I've visited home when I could and kept in touch with my parents regularly, but being away from them is hard. I want to quit my job here and go back to my hometown to build a life. Even if I earn a little less, at least I can be closer to my parents. I was tidying up, my mind wandering as I worked. After finally getting everything clean, I opened the fridge to see if there was anything that needed to be thrown out. To my surprise, I found a bottle of my favorite drink inside. I didn't buy it, and Sylvia took everything when she moved, even the trash bags and bins. There's no way she would have left a drink for me. 17. After some thought, I decided to call the police. The police practically know me by now. Thinking I was reporting another minor dispute, they changed their tune when I explained my suspicion. They immediately dispatched a large team and took the drink away with great seriousness. The results came back quickly, just as I suspected. They really did spike this drink. Since this involved illegal activity, the police wanted to take me in for questioning, but I knew this was my one and only chance to nail Sylvia for good. I took the initiative and told the police, right now, there's no concrete evidence. I can pretend to drink this and lure them out. You can stake out the next room, and we'll catch them red-handed. Plus, you can use them to track down the mastermind behind this. If you confront them now, they'll just deny everything. The police officer was hesitant at first, but after my persistent pleading, he reluctantly agreed. Night, I downed half the bottle of soda in one go, then closed my eyes and waited quietly. Sure enough, around 2 or 3 in the morning, the door was unlocked with a key. The first thing they did upon entering was head to the kitchen and open the fridge. Seeing the drink was gone and spotting the half-empty bottle by my bedside, one of them finally spoke up. I knew it. I knew she'd drink it. Jason quickly praised Sylvia. She's finished for good. We can supply her with the drugs. Not only can we make money, but we can also control her completely. Sylvia let out a soft, disdainful snort. Serves her right. Who does she think she is? Always acting so superior. She thought I moved out because I was afraid of her. The truth is, I just didn't want her to get suspicious. If I'd stayed here, she never would have touched anything I gave her. 18. I pretended to be woken up by the noise. Opening my eyes, seeing them, I put on a look of terror. How did you get in here? What do you want? Get out now, or I'm calling the police. Sylvia shot me a dirty look, sat down on my bed without invitation, and pointed at the drink on the nightstand. You know, giving in to your cravings never ends well. What did you put in my drink? Ignoring Jason's attempts to stop her, Sylvia started talking on her own. My husband slipped you a little something special. It's very expensive. You know, we spent a lot of money on it, but don't worry. You'll pay me back for it later. Oh, and it's quite addictive. I tried my best to look horrified, suppressing a laugh. You drugged me. Do you have any idea how illegal that is? Sylvia snorted. What proof do you have that I did it? I've already moved out. For all I know, you took it yourself. Go ahead, call the police. Let's see if they'll believe your ridiculous story, Sylvia said, growing impatient. Just give me 5,000 for now. I won't ask for more, from now on. 10,000 a month will do. I'm moving back in tomorrow, and my husband is coming too. You'll cover the rent. Any objections? I saw the figure at the door and smiled. No objections at all. From now on, you can both live in a free house. with meals included. Jason heard the sarcastic edge in my voice. He was about to speak when police officers rushed in from the doorway and restrained him. It was only then that the pair realized I had never drunk the beverage. The whole thing was a setup to lure them in, but they were already beyond words. Only the death penalty awaited them. I also successfully sold my house, returned to my hometown, and began a new life. End dash. Story 2. What should you do if the zombie virus breaks out halfway through the CT, for exam? Thanks for the invitation. If I had to answer, I'd say I want to die, on the run. I met the guy I've had a crush on for a long time. We struggled to survive, moving from the library, supermarket, courier station, to the clock tower. Just as we were about to escape from the campus, I was betrayed by a friend. 1. How unlucky can a contemporary college student be? The TEM for exam was postponed, and the teacher qualification exam was also postponed. After 3 years of college, I haven't got any certificates except for the Mandarin proficiency certificate. I decided to take the CET for exam, even though this certificate is of no use to me, but as an English major, if I can't even pass the CT, I might as well set up a stall and sell fried noodles and rice noodles. I signed up with great determination, with the ambition of scoring over 600, and carefully prepared for a month. Finally, on the day of the exam, looking at the test paper, I smiled. Of course, this smile didn't last long. I was stunned to see that the person who was my good classmate one moment turned into a figure like Hannibal the next, tilting his head and rushing towards the invigilator with a gaping, blood-filled mouth. I clutched the test paper, and the classmates around me immediately fell into chaos. The moment the person who rushed into the classroom bit off the invigilator's neck, and blood splattered everywhere, I decisively threw the test paper aside and took off running. Damn it, can't you let me hand in the paper first? What are you standing there for? Run. I noticed that the boy in the first row was still standing there, stunned, as if he was scared silly. I grabbed his arm and pushed him outside. The classroom was crowded, filled with screams and cries for help. What the hell is this? The boy I was holding said in disbelief. Zombies. Do you know what zombies are? I shouted. I haven't finished the questions yet. He was on the verge of collapse. However, I was even more. I finished the questions, but I haven't handed in the paper yet. The boy in front turned around and shouted at us, for God's sake, what are you still talking about at a time like this? The crowd surged. It was finally possible to squeeze out of the classroom, and I realized that the situation outside was not optimistic. The corridor was in chaos, covered in blood. Students were running for their lives everywhere, and there were people whose arms or legs had been bitten off by zombies, wailing in despair. It was like a living hell. What should we do? Michael gripped my arm tightly and said in a trembling voice. My mind was racing. Let's go to the library. I gritted my teeth and said, the library is the closest place to the teaching building. There is food and water in the library, which is currently the safest place. We ran all the way towards the library. On the way, I saw with my own eyes a girl who was screaming and running for her life while clutching her arm one moment, but the next moment, her face turned pale and she pounced fiercely on an unsuspecting boy. I felt a chill down my spine and quickened my pace even more. I swear, I've never run this fast in the 800-meter race. Finally, avoiding the people and zombies along the way, we ran into a reading room on the first floor of the library. Just as we were about to close the door, I saw a boy running towards us from a distance, with a zombie hot on his heels. I quickly opened the door a crack and waved at him. He noticed and rushed towards me, leaving the zombie far behind. He then sidestepped into the room. I quickly closed the door. After a while, I slumped to the ground in relief. When I turned around, my crush Simon and my friend Alice were looking at me in surprise. 2. My crush's name is Simon. With his handsome appearance and excellent grades, he has won the hearts of many girls. Of course, I'm one of them, at this moment, even though I was in the same room as him. I didn't have any romantic thoughts. We briefly described the situation outside, and the group of us stayed in the reading room, feeling uneasy. There's no network either. Alice looked at her phone and said worriedly. My heart sank. Without the network, we were like a desert island in the ocean, completely cut off from the outside world. What should we do now? Michael was on the verge of a breakdown. No one answered him. There's still electricity and water, which means we haven't been completely overrun yet. After a long time, Simon said in a low voice, since we can't get in touch with the outside world, The only thing we can do now is to protect ourselves and wait for rescue. I opened a slit in the curtain and looked at the tragic scene outside. I couldn't bear to look away. The reading room was large, with 2 vending machines at the front and back, and there was enough food and snacks for the time being. We were thinking about our next move when a series of footsteps broke the silence. Through the window glass, a group of people were running towards the library in a panic, with a large wave of zombies following behind. For a moment, everyone fell silent. Now, a question was before us. Should we save them, or not? I looked out the window. One by one, the people who fell behind in the group were pounced on and bitten. Are you serious? You can't be thinking of opening the door, Sebastian said in surprise when he saw that we were silent. There's not much food to begin with. If we let them in, do you want to go out and let the zombies bite you? Besides, his tone changed. How can you be sure that the people we let in haven't been infected? I was silent. Indeed, in this situation, self-preservation was the best choice. But, let them in, Simon said. There was a fierce look in Sebastian's eyes. I don't agree. I stood up and walked straight to the door. If we just stand by and do nothing, how are we any different from those zombies outside? He rushed over and grabbed my wrist. If you want to be a good Samaritan, don't drag my life into it. I looked at him coldly. Don't forget who opened the door for you just now. He stared into my eyes. After a moment, he reluctantly let go of my hand and was pulled aside by Simon. I took a deep breath and picked up a wrench from the corner. Alice opened the door of the reading room and waved to the group of people. The leading boy noticed and immediately ran towards us. When the last person ran in, a wave of zombies had also arrived. Simon dragged a chair and neatly knocked down a zombie. I held the wrench tightly in my hand. Looking at the approaching ferocious faces, I closed my eyes and swung it forward with all my strength. The zombie in front of me fell backward heavily after the blow. I was about to retreat into the room when, out of the corner of my eye, another zombie suddenly pounced on me. I was startled. Before I could react, a knife suddenly pierced through the zombie's head. I took the opportunity to retreat into the room and slammed the door shut. Gasping sounds filled the reading room. Thanks, man. Do you have any food? Give me some. A guy with yellow hair approached Sebastian and tried to get friendly. Sebastian was wiping the blood splattered on his knife with a piece of cloth and stared at him unkindly. There's no food. Get away from me. The guy with yellow hair shuffled away awkwardly. Is there any food? I'm starving. Is there any water? My throat is parched. The group of people chattered. Simon and I exchanged a look. After a moment of silence, we distributed some food and water to them. Why is there so little? You guys are so stingy, the guy with yellow hair complained. There's not much food left. If you don't want to starve to death, you'd better ration it. I pressed the wrench against the table and looked at him coldly. The guy with yellow hair averted his gaze and mumbled something. The reading room was large and divided into 2 parts by a wall, with an arched door on each side of the wall connecting the 2 areas. Our 2 groups occupied separate spaces and didn't interfere with each other. The food is running out, I said in a low voice. The original food was probably enough for the 5 of us to eat for 2 weeks, but with so many more people, it would only last about 5 days. This isn't a long-term solution. When the food runs out, we'll have to go to other classrooms to find food, Simon said, but we can't be sure that there's no one in other classrooms. There are vending machines in the hall, but there are also a lot of zombies, Alice said worriedly, holding a stick that I had removed from the ladder, and those people may not cooperate. I frowned. Humph. Who asked you to meddle and let them in? Sebastian sneered. If it were you outside, would have let you in too, I snorted. He fell silent. So, we either cooperate with them, go to other classrooms to find food, and continue to wait for rescue in the library, or we find another way out, Simon summarized. Michael swallowed hard. A way out? You can't mean going outside. My God, what's the difference between that and suicide? I stood up. The food will run out sooner or later. Do you want to starve to death or be bitten to death by zombies, late at night? We pushed the tables together and laid down a layer of curtains on the tables to sleep on. Fortunately, it was already summer, so it wasn't cold sleeping like this. Alice and I slept on one side, and the 3 of them slept on the other side. Just as I was half asleep, I suddenly heard very faint footsteps. It seemed that someone was groping their way towards me. I immediately became alert. Alice beside me pulled me closer to her. I took the opportunity to roll backward, and a pair of hands landed right where I had been sleeping. I narrowed my eyes, picked up the stick under the pillow, and swung it forward. Hiss! A cry of pain sounded in the silent and dark room. Then, there was movement on Simon's side. What's going on? Have the zombies come in? I heard Michael's nervous voice. With a click, the light was turned on, and the classroom was suddenly bright. I took a closer look. The guy with yellow hair was standing there, grimacing while clutching his arm. What do you think you're doing? I just got up to go to the toilet, he stammered. Really? Then what were you groping around for just now? I asked coldly. Hearing this, Simon also looked at him unkindly. Pervert, Sebastian muttered, just as the guy with yellow hair was about to say something sheepishly. A loud banging on the door suddenly came. I suddenly realized something. The light. It was the light that attracted the zombies. Turn off the light, I whispered to Michael. Michael trembled as he turned off the light, and the room was plunged into darkness again. This night was destined to be a sleepless one. The next day, we all had obvious dark circles under our eyes. The guy with yellow hair had one hand hanging by his side. When he saw us, he avoided our gaze and his eyes flickered. Originally, I didn't really want to dwell on this matter, until someone slipped me a note. It was from a thin and unassuming boy from the group with the yellow-haired guy. He secretly slipped it to me when the others weren't paying attention. They planned to steal the food when you're all asleep. I passed the note around for them to read. Damn it, these people are courting death. Sebastian clenched his fists. We can't just sit here and wait for death, Simon said slowly. We don't know when the rescue will arrive. We need to find supplies that can last at least 2 months. The canteen has the most food in the school. But the canteen closest to the library is still far away, Alice said softly. No, there's another place with abundant supplies. Simon and I exchanged a look and said in unison, the supermarket. There is a supermarket not far behind the library. It only takes 3 minutes to get there through a grove of trees. Then it's settled, the supermarket. We decided. The next day, we told the guy with yellow hair that we would leave with some supplies, while he and his group would stay in the reading room. When he saw that we were planning to leave, a flash of joy crossed the guy with yellow hair's eyes. But when he heard that we were going to take some food with us, his face immediately darkened. Don't go too far, we were here first, so the supplies should be partly ours, Michael shouted. Seeing that the guy with yellow hair still wasn't willing, I quickly walked to the door and put my hand on the doorknob. If you're so eager to see us die, then let's all die together, I threatened. The guy with yellow hair's eyes lingered on the doorknob for a while, and finally, he gave in. The windows of the reading room faced the side of the library. We played songs on loop on our phones at the maximum volume and threw the phones out of the window. While the zombies were attracted by the music, we slipped out through the main entrance. Before leaving, I looked at the boy who had passed me the note. He just shook his head at me. Well, everyone has their own choices. Ready, remember to close the windows tightly. I called out to Sebastian by the window. Good luck comes wishing you good luck. A burst of singing suddenly rang out in the silent environment. Immediately, a large wave of footsteps rushed towards us. When the sounds at the door gradually faded away, I opened the door a crack and peeked outside. I quickly opened the door and dashed towards the library's main entrance. Most of the zombies had been attracted by the music. There wasn't a single soul in the library, only the rapid footsteps of the few of us. We successfully ran out of the library and dashed towards the supermarket. Soon, the grove of trees was right in front of us. Damn it, Sebastian cursed under his breath. I looked up and saw at least 20 zombies wandering in the grove. Sensing the commotion, they were slowly walking towards us. Without time to think too much, I gritted my teeth and whispered to them, "You guys keep running." Then, to their shocked expressions, I shouted at the top of my lungs, "Over here, I'm here." As I shouted, I ran in the opposite direction. My voice alerted the group of zombies, and one by one, they charged towards me. I really have to be grateful that after turning into zombies, their speed has slowed down a lot. Otherwise, with my barely passing the physical fitness test speed, I would have been swallowed up by the zombie horde in no time. I was running for my life when suddenly someone grabbed my hand. I was scared out of my wits, thinking it was a zombie. I instinctively swung my wrench, but then I saw that it was Simon, who was pulling me in another direction. "It's me, this way," he shouted at me. I followed his gaze. The courier station, right behind the library, was the courier station. It was very close to the library, and there was a good chance that the zombies there had been attracted by the music. Since there was no other way out, we dashed towards the courier station. Several times, I could feel the stench of decay right next to me. I desperately followed Simon's footsteps, and our hands were tightly clasped, as if a steady stream of courage was flowing into my body through our joined hands. Closer, even closer. Finally, the moment we stepped into the courier station, I turned around and slammed the door shut, bang, just in time to trap half of the zombie that was chasing us. Simon picked up a wooden plank by the door and hit the zombie. I took the opportunity to loosen my hold slightly, bang. The moment the zombie was pushed out, I quickly closed the door. Violent pounding sounds came from behind the door. At this moment, I was extremely grateful that after a major theft incident, the school had reinforced the doors and windows of all courier stations. I began to let go of the new clothes and cosmetics that had been stolen during that theft. Thankful, when the knocking sounds behind us gradually weakened, I finally let out a sigh of relief, but before I could fully relax, Simon suddenly tugged at my clothes. I looked up in confusion and saw 3 zombies standing silently at the end of the long row of courier lockers. For, damn it, I almost cursed out loud. Was I really that unlucky? My nerves tensed up, and I tightened my grip on the wrench. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I counted silently in my mind. When I reached the last number, the figures at the end suddenly charged towards me. Simon and I also rushed forward. I aimed for the zombie on the far right. When its face was right in front of me, I suddenly bent down, nimbly dodged behind it, and swung the wrench at its head. With a splat, something splashed onto my hand, and the wrench slipped to the ground. Just as I was about to pick it up, another zombie was already in front of me. Its stinking, gaping mouth was right in front of me, with the courier locker behind me. There was nowhere to run. Suddenly, a pair of hands locked around the zombie's shoulders and neck from behind, and the 2 of them fell to the ground together. Quick, Simon's veins popped out on his neck, and his face turned red. I took the opportunity to pick up the wrench. Move your head, bang, bang, bang. I slammed the wrench into the zombie's head again and again until blood was gushing out and brains were splattering. Only then did I slowly stop. For a moment, it was dead silent in the courier station. When the zombie showed no more signs of movement, I collapsed to the ground. Completely drained of strength, Simon pushed the zombie off him. There was blood and brains splattered on him, and he no longer looked as clean as before. The same went for me, but I no longer had the energy to care about that. After the intense chase and life and death battle, the string in my mind finally began to relax. Good job. Simon walked over and patted me on the shoulder. You too, I replied weakly, after calming down. We quickly cleaned ourselves up. What do we do now? I asked, munching on the potato chips I'd taken from an opened courier box. There were a lot of open courier boxes around me. After all, no girl can resist the temptation of parcels. I wonder if they made it to the supermarket safely, Simon said, returning to the gentle demeanor I first saw in him. My heart started pounding again. Trying to act calm, I averted my gaze and suddenly saw something. Wait, look, I said surprisingly, looking outside. Alice was standing by the window on the 2nd floor of the supermarket not far away, waving frantically at me. When she saw that I'd noticed her, she looked even more excited. I pointed at the zombies wandering outside and shook my head. With zombies outside, there was no way we could get over there. She seemed to be discussing something with Sebastian beside her. After a while, she reappeared, holding a phone. She pointed at the phone, then at Sebastian, and made some gestures towards me. It took me a while to figure out what she was trying to say. She means that Sebastian will play music on the phone and go out to lure the zombies away, and then we can go in through the front door, I explained to Simon. He thought for a moment and nodded. I think it's feasible. I looked at Sebastian across the way, whose expression was unreadable. I didn't think he was the type to risk his life for others. But at this moment, there was no other choice. As I was packing up, I saw some medicated oil that had been taken out from the pile of parcels on the table and stuffed it into my bag. I gave Alice a thumbs up. After a while, a rope was lowered from the window on the 2nd floor of the supermarket. Sebastian nimbly slid down the rope, and then the ear-piercing music started playing again. A few seconds later, the rumbling sound of footsteps came. Looking at the dense horde of zombies outside, my heart was in my throat. Are you ready? I looked at Simon. He was taken aback for a moment, then a faint smile played on his lips. Yes, I do. I tried my best to hide the smile that was threatening to spread across my face. when Sebastian had lured the zombie horde far away and the music gradually faded away, Simon and I dashed outside. We ran through the grove of trees, and everything went smoothly. I couldn't help but feel a surge of joy. But the moment we turned the corner and reached the entrance of the supermarket, my face froze. We ran straight into a group of zombies that had also turned the corner and reached the entrance. Damn it, there were still some zombies that hadn't been lured away by the music. I was in a complete panic, but since we'd come this far, I had no choice but to face it head on. 5. With a swing of my wrench, I knocked the head off one zombie. Turning around, I saw that Simon had also taken down a zombie. I looked towards the corner, and my pupils suddenly shrank. Damn it, why are there so many more? Don't they like music? I wailed, deftly dodging the zombies' attacks. As the supermarket entrance got closer and closer, Alice stood behind the door, looking at me anxiously. I ran even harder. I turned back to pull Simon, but then I saw a zombie behind him opening its mouth to bite his neck. In an instant, my mind went blank. I instinctively stepped forward, pushed his head down, and then kicked out with all my strength. The zombie behind him was sent flying to the ground. I took the opportunity to pull him towards the door. Just as we were about to reach the door, Alice opened it and quickly closed it again after we stepped inside. Thud. I looked back and saw more and more zombies gathering at the door, crashing into the glass door frantically. I even wondered if the door would shatter in the next second. Michael took a piece of cloth and quickly covered the glass door. Slowly, the crashing sounds outside weakened. If they can't see us, they won't go crazy like this, Michael said, wiping the sweat from his forehead and relaxing. Suddenly, I realized something was wrong. Sebastian, he was still outside. Did you have a plan for how Sebastian would get in? I asked urgently. Alice's voice trembled as she said, We originally planned for him to come in through the front or back door. My heart sank. No, the front door was already blocked by zombies. Since there were still so many zombies that hadn't been lured away by the music, there must be zombies at the back door too. My face turned pale instantly, and I dashed towards the second floor. I rushed to the window and took a closer look. Sebastian's running figure came into view. Seemingly seeing the zombies at the entrance, he suddenly stopped in his tracks, looking at a loss. Over here, come here. I grabbed the rope by the window and shouted at the top of my lungs, hearing my voice. He glanced at me from a distance, then dashed towards me without hesitation. Thanks to his long legs, he managed to put some distance between himself and the chasing zombies, just like before. Then, with a leap, he grabbed the rope. Fortunately, Simon, Michael, and I were all holding onto the rope, or I would have been pulled down by his momentum. The veins on my hands stood out as I pulled back with all my might. Finally, his head appeared outside the window. I grabbed his hand. With one hand holding mine and the other supporting himself on the windowsill, he nimbly stepped inside and landed on the ground. I collapsed to the ground, completely exhausted. I could even taste the metallic tang of blood in my throat. This was too much, I thought. I'd be exhausted to death before the zombies even got a chance to eat me. There were far more supplies in the supermarket than we'd expected, enough to last us half a year. We rummaged through the supermarket for useful items. Look outside, Simon patted me on the shoulder. To be honest, I was now afraid of him touching me, always worried that I'd turn around and see a zombie. I looked out the window. In the distance, a dark figure flew across the sky. I squinted and looked for a long time. It's a plane, I said surprisingly. A plane? Are we saved? Michael exclaimed, rushing to the window. It looks like it's dropping something, I observed after watching for a while. The plane slowly got closer. Michael waved his hands frantically. Over here, we're here. It seemed that the plane had seen us. It flew towards us, circled above our roof for a while, dropped a package, and then flew away. Why did it leave? Has the country given up on us too? Michael said desperately, collapsing to the ground. Just as I was about to say something, Alice walked over with something in her hand. It was a walkie-talkie radio. We found a charging cable and plugged it in. Simon turned on the recording function on his phone, and we listened to the intermittent messages coming from the radio. Currently, an unknown virus has broken out. The infected are extremely aggressive. Please citizens protect yourselves, and be careful not to get bitten. The country is organizing aerial rescue. Please citizens wait at high places, or stockpile supplies and stay in safe locations. Every week, supplies will be airdropped. Please pay attention to your safety. Please believe. We will not give up on anyone. We will not give up on anyone. 6. Late at night, we huddled together in the dark room. The country hasn't given up on us, I said, my eyes shining brightly in the darkness, a fire burning in my heart. The country has started the rescue. All we need to do now is wait, or go to a high place to seek aerial rescue, of course. The second option was too difficult and was automatically ruled out by me. That's great, I finally feel a bit more at ease. Michael murmured, I wonder how my mom and the others are doing. We fell silent. This topic was too heavy, and we tried our best to avoid mentioning it along the way. Suddenly, I felt that the person beside me was breathing erratically. Alice, what's wrong with you? I gently touched her. It's okay, I'm just, she replied in a trembling voice. Before she could finish, I picked up my phone and turned on the flashlight towards her. Don't lie to me, what on earth is wrong with you? In the dark, my voice was sharp and panicky. Could it be that you were? My heart was beating extremely fast, and I even felt a little dizzy. Sebastian made some noise on the opposite side, but I didn't pay attention. No, it's not. She replied softly, I just fell down, under the flashlight. The wound on her knee was a bloody mess, almost showing the bone. I was filled with self-blame and carefully treated her wound. Fortunately, there were some simple emergency medicines in the supermarket, but a few days later, I found that the wound didn't get better. In summer, bacteria are prone to breed, and the wound on her knee became more and more serious. With pus oozing out, the medicine in the supermarket didn't work at all. She has a fever, I'm afraid she's infected, she needs to take antibiotics, Simon said in a low voice. However, the school infirmary was near the school gate, which was extremely far from the supermarket. It was simply impossible for us to go there and bring back the medicine. Moreover, none of the 5 of us were medical students, and we had no idea what medicine to use. I looked at Alice's slightly flushed face due to the fever and tightly held her hand. After a while, I finally made up my mind. I planned to take Alice to the bell tower and wait for the aerial rescue. When we gathered as usual at night, I said calmly, the highest place in the school was the bell tower. The top of the bell tower was a large flat ground, which was the best location for the aerial rescue. What? Are you crazy? Michael said in disbelief. Alice's wound is infected. She won't be able to hold on like this, I said in a low voice, looking at Alice's sleeping face beside me. Besides, haven't you noticed that the glass of the supermarket won't hold up for long? Everyone fell silent. The door of the supermarket hadn't been reinforced, and there were already slight cracks on it. But, maybe, it can hold on for a while. Michael's voice gradually faded. Indeed, there were abundant supplies here, and it was like a paradise, giving us a temporarily comfortable life. But this wasn't a real paradise after all. In the end, they all decided to go to the bell tower with me. We'll die anyway when the door breaks. Instead of being trapped like turtles in a jar by the zombies, we might as well take a desperate gamble, Sebastian said indifferently. Simon looked at me, and in his eyes was the tenderness and determination that I was familiar with. We will survive. 7. The last time the plane appeared was at 6 o'clock in the morning. We set out at 5 o'clock in the morning 7 days later. I sprayed the medicated oil that I had taken from the courier station on my body. As Sebastian said, this could cover up the smell of meat on us, and maybe we could get away with it. We found a megaphone in the supermarket and turned the volume to the maximum. We tied the megaphone together with Alice's phone, ready to attract the zombies to the front of the supermarket, and we would go to the bell tower through the back door. As for the zombies that managed to escape our plan on the way, we could only leave it to fate. At 5 o'clock in the morning, there was already a faint light outside. After everything was ready, I took a deep breath. Just an hour, good luck to us. After adjusting the phone, Simon threw it out with a piece of foam wrapped around it. The ear-piercing singing instantly broke the tranquility of the morning, and then came the violent footsteps like an earthquake. After the zombies in our sight disappeared, Sebastian was the first to climb down the rope, followed by Michael, Alice, me, and then Simon. After we all landed safely, Simon and I supported Alice and dashed towards the bell tower. Chi-Chi, if we encounter danger, leave me behind, I can buy you some time. Alice's panting voice rang in my ear. My heart was pounding violently in my chest. No, that's impossible. I squeezed out the words through my teeth. Wait, in front. Sebastian suddenly made a gesture to stop. We suddenly stopped in our tracks. In the dim night, there were more than a dozen figures standing in front of us. my throat tightened, the pungent smell of medicated oil lingered on us. I held Alice's hand and slowly, gently, moved forward step by step. Those black figures still stood where they were and didn't react. I made a gesture towards them. We slowly approached the bell tower in the dark. Several times, I even smelled the strong stench of decay coming from them. I noticed that Michael's body was shaking violently. I gently touched his hand. And he looked at me. I gave him a reassuring look. Gradually, we quickened our pace and left those hunters behind. In the morning light, the blurred outline of the bell tower came into view. The door was open, and it was pitch black inside. As if there were unknown dangers lurking, we exchanged a look, slowed down our pace, and slowly walked up the steps. In the hall, there were several black figures scattered around. We groped our way towards the elevator. The smell of medicated oil dissipated a bit and wasn't as strong as before. We slowly moved to the elevator entrance and gently pressed the button to go upstairs. The rooftop was on the 7th floor, and the elevator could only reach the 5th floor. We had to climb the remaining 2 floors by ourselves. We waited anxiously for the elevator door to open. Click. I don't know what Michael stepped on, and a slight sound came. My body froze, out of the corner of my eye. Several zombies seemed to sense something and slowly turned around and walked towards us. Hurry up, I frantically urged in my heart and clenched the wrench in my hand. Finally, when the zombies were only 2 meters away from us, the elevator door opened. The tension in my eyes hadn't dissipated, but my pupils suddenly shrank. Inside the elevator, a figure with blood on its body was standing with its back to us. Michael looked even more panicked. Sebastian was the first to step into the elevator. His movements were as light as a cat, and he didn't make a sound. He turned around and signaled to us. I gritted my teeth and walked in lightly. The elevator door slowly closed, and the air inside was as suffocating as if it had solidified. I frantically suppressed my breathing, and big beads of sweat were dropping from my forehead, as if sensing something. The zombie with its back to us suddenly moved and seemed to turn around stiffly. I glanced at Sebastian, who was the closest to the zombie, and he nodded at me. I coughed softly under Michael's nervous gaze. The zombie suddenly turned its head and looked at me. Just then, Sebastian behind the zombie suddenly took action. He stabbed the zombie in the back of the head with a knife at lightning speed. With a splat sound, I caught the falling body and gently leaned it against the corner of the elevator. We finally let out a sigh of relief. But as the number on the electronic screen slowly jumped to 5, our hearts were raised again. What would the scene be like outside? Would there be hordes of zombies greeting us? Ding! The elevator door slowly opened. Fortunately, there was no one outside. Just as we turned the corner and walked towards the stairs, I thought of something. Give me your phone, I said in a low voice to Simon. He paused, our eyes met, and at that moment, he seemed to understand my thoughts. He still handed me his phone. I held the phone, looked at the time on it, and finally made up my mind. Take care of my parents if possible. After saying this, I turned around and rushed in the other direction. It seemed that someone called me, but I couldn't hear it at all. My nerves seemed to reach the peak of tension at this moment. I turned a corner, and a zombie awesomely appeared in front of me. I dodged its fierce pounce, turned around, and hit it on the leg with the wrench. The zombie stumbled and fell to the ground. I seized the opportunity and stabbed it in the head. After dealing with the trouble, I continued to rush forward and finally found the room I was looking for. The door was open. Fortunately, there were no zombies inside. This was the broadcasting station. 8. I quickly opened the main switch and the power supply, plugged in the equipment, and connected the microphone. Hello, can you hear me? I said tentatively and heard the sound of the broadcast outside. Good. I didn't care how much trouble this action would cause. I quickly took out my phone, played the recording, and put it in front of the microphone with the volume turned to the maximum. I listened to the echoing voices outside. Currently, unknown virus. Please citizens protect yourselves. The country is organizing aerial rescue. Please citizens wait at high places, or stockpile supplies and stay in safe locations. Every week, supplies will be airdropped. Safety, please believe. We will not give up on anyone. We will not give up on anyone. During the days in the supermarket, I heard the sound of people falling from upstairs more than once. I don't know how many people lost their lives because of this disaster, and I don't know how many people committed suicide out of despair. But I know that in places I can't see, there are many people fighting as hard as we are, and there are also many people who have lost the courage to live. I want to plant a seed of hope in them. Students, we are not fighting alone, no matter how difficult the situation is. Please hold on. The dawn will eventually come. The school broadcast could just help divert the attention of some zombies. I set the recording to play on a loop. After setting the time to turn it off, I planned to leave. When I turned around, I found Sebastian standing behind me, quietly watching me. Damn, you scared the hell out of me. Why are you walking without making a sound? My heart almost jumped out of my chest. He turned his head awkwardly. Hurry up, the time is pressing. I grabbed his hand and rushed outside. On the way, I saw several zombies lying on the ground. Presumably, Sebastian had taken care of them on his way here. We successfully ran to the rooftop, after closing the rooftop door tightly. I immediately ran towards Simon and the others. How is it? Simon frowned anxiously. Over there. I looked up at the sky, and an airplane appeared not far away against the rising sun, as if seeing our signal. The airplane gradually approached us. I was overjoyed, but suddenly realized something. Damn it, the roar of the airplane would attract the zombies. I suddenly turned around. Quick, reinforce the door. But the rooftop was a flat ground, and there was nothing we could use to reinforce the door. I used the wrench that had been with me since the end of the world to block the door handle. Rumble, the roar of the airplane grew louder and louder. I could almost predict that in a few minutes, or maybe even less, countless zombies would approach us following the sound. Michael stomped his feet anxiously. Quick, hurry up. Finally, the airplane landed on the rooftop, and the propeller stirred up a strong wind. The cabin door opened. Simon and I supported Alice and immediately rushed towards the airplane. Bang, bang, bang. The door on the rooftop came a violent crashing sound, as if it would tear the thin door apart in the next second. I quickened my pace and quickly ran towards the airplane. Simon was the first to get on the plane. He reached out and pulled Alice up. I supported Alice's legs from below and successfully sent her up. Quick, come up. Simon shouted at me. The impact sound became more and more intense, and I even heard the sound of the wooden board cracking. I quickly grabbed the cabin board and climbed up. Sebastian supported my foot and pushed me up, but just as I was halfway up, the pilot uncle's anxious voice came from the front. No, this airplane is for transporting supplies. It can't carry so many of you. At most, only 3 people can get on. My heart tightened, and my movements suddenly stopped. Only 3 people could get on. Simon's expression changed, and he quickly reacted. I'll go down, you come up, he said and came towards me. Alice also reached out to grab me. Chi-Chi, come up quickly. Behind me, the impact sound still didn't stop, and a hole had been broken in the door. The bluish-black face of the zombie was vaguely visible. My heart was filled with torment. Countless thoughts flashed through my mind. In an instant, I made a decision. I pushed Simon hard and shook my head at him under his shocked gaze. Take care of my parents if possible. After saying this, I turned around neatly. The strong wind blew my clothes. Just as I was about to jump down, I suddenly felt my ankle being pulled violently. With a bang sound, I fell heavily to the ground, and a sharp pain immediately came from my calf. The pain made my eyes go dark, and cold sweat broke out all over my body. What are you doing? What the hell are you doing? In a daze, I seemed to hear someone's furious roar. I struggled to get up. The first thing I saw wasn't Sebastian's angry face, but the zombies that finally broke through the rooftop door and rushed in. Quick, get on the plane. I managed to shout at them, but my voice was quickly drowned out by the deafening footsteps. Sebastian's eyes were bloodshot, and his sharply contoured face was distorted with anger, looking extremely terrifying. I had never seen him so angry before. Stop arguing. Hurry up and get on the plane, I frantically shouted in my heart, but my throat was already dry and hoarse, and I couldn't say a word. Only 3 people can get on. I want to live. I heard Michael's trembling voice. Yes, who doesn't want to live? I wanted them to get on the plane quickly. Sebastian's eyes were wide open, and it seemed that flames were about to burst out of his eyes. Then, to my surprise, he grabbed Michael's collar, lifted him up with one hand, and then threw him backwards without hesitation. Michael crashed heavily into the surging mass of zombies, and in an instant, his figure disappeared from sight. I stared at Sebastian in disbelief. Behind him, a dense horde of zombies rushed towards him, but he didn't look back. He helped me up, his movements rough yet swift, and somehow managed not to cause any further damage to my wound. He bent down and carried me on his back, then lifted me high and pushed me towards the cabin door. Quick, catch her, he roared at Simon, and I even suspected that he might spit out blood foam the next second. Sebastian, I desperately wanted to stop him, but my voice was barely audible. I was completely exhausted, able only to lean weakly against his back. Simon's strong hand grabbed my arm. I've got her. His voice lacked its usual elegance. The pilot up front kept issuing urgent cries for us to hurry. Sebastian and I were almost engulfed by the tide of zombies, yet he used his tall frame to push me upward with all his might, ignoring the bites and gnaws on his body. His warm body heat seeped through his clothes and into mine. Simon and Alice pulled together, finally dragging half of my body into the plane. My foot rested on Sebastian's back. He held my foot with both hands. I looked down. Half of his body was already submerged in the zombie horde, covered in blood, but he still looked up at me. As the sky grew lighter, his eyes were filled with only my figure. Finally, I was pulled onto the plane by Simon. The plane slowly took off, kicking up clouds of dust and a strong wind. I leaned against the cabin railing. That blood-soaked figure still stood firm, maintaining an upward posture. I could almost still see those bright eyes. The plane flew towards the horizon, getting farther and farther away, until that figure was completely swallowed by the surging tide and vanished from sight. It felt like water droplets landed on the back of my hand. When I looked up, I realized I was already in tears. In the distance, the golden sun slowly rose, illuminating the desolate land. The night receded, and the dawn was finally here. Epilogue. Sebastian had known her for a long time. The first time he saw her was during the club recruitment. She was with Alice, and they seemed to glow under the sun. Strangely, he couldn't tear his eyes away. The slight annoyance he felt at being dragged in by senior girls to serve as eye candy disappeared instantly. He even felt a hint of excitement. However, to his disappointment, she casually took the flyer handed by the senior and didn't give it a second look. It seemed she wasn't very interested in their club. Sebastian watched as she stopped in front of the calligraphy club where Simon was. He saw her chatting animatedly with Simon, as if there was no one else in her eyes. That initial disappointment quickly turned into a pang of discomfort. It was like a gentle sting from a bee, leaving a mark in his heart. Sebastian couldn't help but keep his eyes on her. Whenever she was around, his gaze would fixate on her, like a dragon coveting a precious treasure. His eyes held a longing that he himself wasn't fully aware of, yet he hesitated to approach, afraid that his presence might disrupt her life. Sebastian, who was always straightforward and hot-tempered, for the first time felt such confusion and distress. When the virus broke out, he followed her all the way to the library, taking out the zombies that tried to get close to her along the way. To his surprise, she waved at him, even though they were in the midst of a hellish situation. The moment he saw her, it felt like he was in a peaceful haven. He deliberately said harsh things, acting like a child, using the most clumsy ways to catch her attention. In fact, he didn't really care about rescuing others or opening the door. As long as she was safe, nothing else mattered to him. Or perhaps, it wouldn't be so bad if they died together. There was a dark, secret hope in his heart. When the rescued guy with yellow hair looked at her with a disgusting gaze, anger welled up in Sebastian. No, it wasn't the right time yet. He struggled to suppress his anger. When they were about to leave, she called out loudly for him to hurry and close the windows. Sebastian responded while opening the window a crack and throwing his phone out. Then he turned and left without hesitation. On the way, he saw her running in the opposite direction alone to draw the zombies' attention. He instinctively wanted to chase after her, but someone was faster. Damn it, Sebastian thought expressionlessly. This guy was as annoying as ever, no matter the situation. To ensure she could reach the supermarket safely, Sebastian volunteered to go out and lure the zombies away. He secretly hoped that she would return safely while that pretty boy Simon would die out there. He felt a glimmer of anticipation when he came back and saw the supermarket door surrounded by zombies. Sebastian was indeed stunned, but then, she stood upstairs and waved at him, shouting at him anxiously. In that moment, he couldn't make out what she was saying. His body moved before his mind, and he was already running towards her. As he climbed up the rope, he felt something brush against his foot. After getting into the supermarket, he secretly checked and found a bite mark. Although it was shallow, it was clearly a bite mark, with blood slowly seeping out. Sebastian calmly wiped it away with a tissue and then acted as if nothing had happened. Perhaps dying together with her was really a good choice, he thought again. But when the time came, He would definitely be the first to bite Simon, ruin that face that attracted so much attention. He felt his body gradually changing, but he still didn't say a word. He heard that she decided to go to the bell tower for rescue because of Alice. If I were the one injured, would you take such a risk for me? He wondered blankly, feeling a mix of grievance and reluctance, when she parted ways with the others at the bell tower. Sebastian, who had been keeping a close eye on her, immediately chased after her. This time, he was finally faster than that pretty boy. He heard what she said in the broadcasting room. The dawn will eventually come. In that moment, he suddenly understood her unwavering perseverance. He did his best to hold her feet from below, pushing her towards the plane. Only 3 people can get on. Oh, so only 3 people could board. He thought indifferently. It definitely wouldn't be him anyway. He might as well pull Simon down. He looked up and saw that Simon was at the far end, making it difficult to act. Tsk, what a pity. Suddenly, she fell heavily to the ground, and blood started to seep from her calf. In an instant, it felt like his brain had been slammed with a heavy hammer. He roughly grabbed Michael. A violent impulse surged through his veins, making him want to tear the guy apart. This scum, how dare he? He desperately suppressed his bloodthirsty urge, ignoring Michael's cries, and threw him into the oncoming horde of zombies. What the hell is this? Countless zombies gnawed at his flesh. He could barely feel his lower body anymore. Not until more than half of her body was finally on the plane did he lift her foot up again. A zombie bit into his neck, tearing off a large piece of flesh. But he didn't care. How strange, he thought. He had never been someone who cared about others' lives. Initially, he wanted to board the plane with her, spend the remaining time together, and then hold her as they fell from the plane. Yet the moment he saw her fall, his instinct was to get her onto the plane, and to tear apart the person who pulled her down. So, I want her to live, he realized. The plane took off, and her figure gradually disappeared on the horizon. Sebastian still maintained that posture, looking up until the morning sun shone into his eyes, with a hint of regret. He closed his eyes and fell into eternal sleep in the darkness. So, I wanted you to live. Your survival is my reason to keep going. Story 2. At first, the extreme cold struck suddenly, and people tenaciously endured it. However, just as people joyfully welcomed the warming of the temperature, a tide of zombies one after another. When people went through great hardships to defeat the zombies and welcome the bright future of humanity with hope, they finally realized that the extreme cold was the gentle shelter of the earth for humanity, and the tide of zombies was just a simple trial. What ultimately destroys humanity is, after all, man-made disasters. This time, can I, Griffin, lead my family to escape from death? 1. The extreme cold descended in an unprecedentedly terrifying way. The sky was heavily shrouded in leaden gray clouds. As if bearing the weight of the world, the heavy snow danced wildly in the air like a devil. And the fierce wind roared. The icy snowflakes whipped fiercely at people's faces and bodies. The temperature plummeted, as if even the air was frozen, making every breath difficult. Overnight, the world was covered by thick snow, turning into a cold and silvery white desert. The cold at that time not only tortured people's bodies but also brutally tested their minds. When night fell, the cold wind and ice crystals lingered outside the window like ghosts, making strange and terrifying sounds, as if something ominous was trying to break into the house. Nevertheless, relying on our simple life experience and keen intuition, my family and I tenaciously endured that extremely cold time. Although life was full of hardships during that period, we always managed to make a living. Once, my family was fortunate to be sheltered in an underground rescue center and enjoyed a rare period of peace. However, it was precisely those life experiences that allowed us to detect the potential danger in advance. Therefore, we resolutely chose to leave that seemingly safe shelter together with the villagers. Some villagers responded to our decision and left the underground rescue center in advance to return to the village on the ground. In the end, we successfully avoided the rampage of the zombie virus, although we have broken free from the shackles of fate several times. When we retreated to the remote village again, the tricks of fate always came uninvited. From the underground rescue center, we brought back some cold-resistant clothes and practical tools. These precious items greatly enhanced our ability to withstand the severe cold. Naturally, the villagers began to form divisions of labor and went out one after another to collect living supplies. This change brought a glimmer of hope and expectation to our lives. However, just when we thought we could finally relax a bit, a sudden pneumonia raged among the villagers. The number of infected people soared rapidly, with persistent high fevers and continuous coughing. This epidemic plunged our newly stabilized life into chaos and unease again. At first, people supported each other and shared medicine. However, as the number of infected people continued to increase, this atmosphere of unity and mutual assistance gradually disappeared. Replaced by everyone's deep worry about their own future, the sharing of medicine was also interrupted as a result. This change exacerbated the deterioration of the epidemic, causing Lennox to fail to survive this disaster and leave us forever. Similarly, my eldest son also passed away due to persistent high fever. My second son was also infected with pneumonia, but he was luckier, and his condition did not deteriorate rapidly. He held on until the moment when I contacted the troops to launch a second rescue. After receiving treatment, my second son's condition quickly stabilized. At the same time, the spread of pneumonia in the village was gradually brought under control. However, regrettably, this tribulation did not make the villagers more united. Instead, it made them defensive and created an insurmountable estrangement among them. After that, some people chose to follow the troops and go to a new underground rescue center for shelter. However, after discussion, my family decided to stay put. This sudden change deeply affected my wife and me. We became more taciturn and had fewer exchanges with the villagers. After dealing with Lennox's funeral arrangements, we made an important decision to move out of the concentrated residential area of the brigade and return to our old family house to live. This way of life allows us to maintain our independence while also maintaining necessary contact and cooperation with the village. 2. My wife sometimes complains to me. She asks me in confusion why I don't consider going to the underground rescue center. After all, objectively speaking, the facilities and resources there should be far better than our current living environment. However, I still can't find the courage to tell her that the underground rescue center, which we once placed great hope in, has now become a blocked-off restricted area. All she knows is that there was once a rat infestation there, which led to the abandonment of this underground rescue center, but she knows nothing about the subsequent outbreak of the zombie tide. Whenever she mentions this topic, I always prevaricate and avoid in-depth discussion because I'm afraid that if she knows the truth, she will be even more frightened and lose confidence in the future life. So, I choose to remain silent and devote my energy and time to taking care of my family, preparing food, and doing housework, trying to create a relatively stable living environment for them in this apocalyptic situation. Despite this, although I appear calm on the surface, I can't hide the deep panic in my heart. Every day, I silently bear this pressure and fear, striving to maintain the normal operation of this family. And at the same time, I also look forward to the early end of this disaster. I often recall the tragic scene of the underground rescue center, zombies rampaging, people being bitten, and helpless cries and desperate eyes intertwined. That scene was like a living hell, and even the tanks of the troops couldn't withstand the crazy zombies. These pictures are like nightmares that linger, filling me with fear for the future. In the face of my silence, my wife didn't delve deeper. After all, we still have to carry on with our lives. Fortunately, our food reserves are still relatively sufficient. After my second son recovered from pneumonia, both my wife and I were fortunate enough not to be infected. Although life has not fully returned to normal, at least we can still survive. Moreover, there is some good news in our life. The broadcasting system has been rebuilt and put into use. Now, my second son's greatest entertainment is playing with the hand-cranked generator radio. He is keen on listening to the broadcasts from all over the place and has a strong curiosity and yearning for the life in the underground rescue center. Such a life is simple and unadorned, but it reveals a rare peace and tranquility. We try our best to get our life back on track, cherish every moment in front of us, and also have expectations and hopes for the future life. However, when I listen to the radio with my child, I find an unusual phenomenon. Some radio stations on certain frequency bands will suddenly disappear, and then we can no longer receive their signals, as if they had never existed. This phenomenon makes me begin to suspect that the things I have experienced may also be happening in other underground rescue centers in other regions. As the number of radio stations decreases day by day, the soldiers who come to the village for material exchange also become increasingly scarce, and each time it is a different soldier. At first, some young soldiers would still suggest to us that if life on the ground was too difficult, they could help us re-enter the underground rescue center. But now, whenever the soldiers come, they just try their best to leave more supplies for us and avoid talking about the things in the underground rescue center. I deeply feel the unease brought about by this change, and my worry about my family and the future is also growing day by day. I can't be sure what changes have occurred in this world. Every soldier who comes seems exhausted, but they always remain silent about what has happened. I vaguely feel that the disappearance of each radio station may mean the destruction of an underground rescue center. Now, the situation is becoming more and more severe. Perhaps the military is already powerless and can only choose to remain silent and do its best to ensure the survival of most people. Such a current situation undoubtedly brings me great pressure and deep worry. But I also clearly realize that what should come will eventually come, and we can only face it calmly. 3. What gives everyone confidence in the future is that the weather is finally gradually warming up, the sun shines generously through the clouds onto the earth, and the snow that once covered the ground in silver begins to show signs of melting. With the rise in temperature, the village that was originally shrouded in severe cold seems to come back to life, and the villagers' moods also become relaxed and joyful accordingly. An indescribable atmosphere of joy permeates the village. In such good weather, everyone comes out of their houses one after another to feel the long-lost warm sunshine. Some elderly villagers choose to sit on the stone benches at the entrance of the village. They squint their eyes, leisurely bask in the sun, chat about family affairs, and their faces are filled with satisfied and serene smiles. While some industrious villagers start to get busy, they take tools, repair the houses damaged by the severe cold, and sort out the fields covered by snow. Making full preparations for the upcoming farming season, the children are even more excited. They play snowball fights and build snowmen in the snow, fully enjoying the joy at the end of the extreme cold. As the snow gradually melts, the earth begins to reveal its original appearance, and the moist soil exudes a fresh smell. The tender green grass in the fields that was originally covered by snow pokes its head out of the soil, as if announcing the arrival of spring to the world. In such an atmosphere, my wife's mood also becomes more and more joyful. She stands at the door of the house, looking out at the distant fields, and a long-lost smile appears on her face. She sees the hope of life, and looks forward to restoring a normal life as soon as possible and feeling the beauty and tranquility of life again. Now, the villagers' moods have also become kind. They have regained their former kindness and enthusiasm, and the relationship between them has become more harmonious. My wife often takes the children to visit the neighbors in the village, exchanges experiences and insights with them, and shares each other's joys and sorrows. This kind of intimate communication makes them feel the warmth and unity of the village. At the same time, the villagers have also expanded the scope of their material collection. Everyone actively prepares together to restore the normal order of life. The villagers not only collect daily necessities but also bring back some seeds, intending to plant hope in the new farming season. However, as the scope of activities increases, the villagers discover a shocking fact. The underground rescue center has been listed as a restricted area and is closely guarded by the troops. This secret has triggered countless speculations and rumors, and the villagers begin to talk about it. Some people say that there are important military secrets hidden there. Some people say that it is a secret laboratory of the government. And some even spread the rumor that there are terrifying monsters imprisoned there. Although various gossips and rumors are flying around, most people don't seem to care too much. The villagers are more willing to believe that this is a necessary measure taken by the government to ensure the safety of the villagers. After all, under the shining of the warm sun, the haze in people's hearts has gradually dissipated. The sun gives people infinite courage and hope, making them feel the beauty of life. At this moment, people's hearts are only filled with joy. They are fortunate that they have survived the disaster and are looking forward to a new life. However, unlike the villagers immersed in the warm sun and optimistic atmosphere, I am still shrouded in deep fear all day long. I know very well that the secret hidden in that underground center is far more terrifying and thrilling than what the villagers can imagine. The terrifying creature that once destroyed the underground rescue center is very likely to appear on the ground now with the warming of the temperature. Whenever it is late at night and everything is quiet, I always neurotically feel that I seem to hear the harsh alarm sound that once rang in that underground center, as well as the terrifying sound of that terrifying creature biting and gnawing. These sounds echo in the dark, constantly increasing the fear in my heart. For that night, I tossed and turned in bed, unable to fall asleep. Suddenly, the explosion sound in the distance broke the silence of the night and woke me up from a half-dream and half-awake state. Subsequently, the roar of fighter jets and the successive explosion sounds echoed in the night sky. I walked outside and saw from a distance that there was a faint firelight coming from the direction of the underground rescue center. My heart sank, and I knew very well that that terrifying creature had finally appeared. However, strangely enough, when I was really about to face all this, the panic and fear that had been lurking in my heart in the past actually disappeared without a trace, replaced by an inexplicable calmness. The human heart is indeed a wonderful thing. In peaceful days, we may be troubled by various worries and fears, but when a real challenge comes, the strength in our hearts can make us face it bravely. My wife was also awakened by the continuous explosion sounds. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and asked me, "What's going on? Why is it so noisy outside?" I hugged my wife tightly, looked at our child who was still sleeping peacefully, and then described to her in detail what I had seen and heard in the underground rescue center. I took a deep breath and then said, "Wife, do you know why the underground rescue center we went to has been listed as a restricted area?" My wife showed a confused expression and asked back, "Isn't it because of the previous rat infestation?" "Husband, why do you suddenly mention this? The sound outside sounds like an explosion. What on earth is going on?" I was silent for a moment and said in a slightly heavy voice, "Those are indeed explosion sounds. The zombie monsters in the underground rescue center have escaped." My wife looked at me and asked in disbelief, "Husband, are you confused? What zombie monsters? What are you talking about?" She reached out and touched my forehead, then said, "You don't have a fever either. Why are you talking nonsense?" I stared at my wife, took a deep breath, and said, "Wife, I'm fine, but now I have to tell you the truth. The things that happened in the underground center are far more terrifying than the rat infestation you saw." A trace of unease flashed in her eyes, but she still looked at me, waiting for me to continue. "Not long after you left the underground rescue center, something strange happened there." I recalled. The originally ordinary rats suddenly mutated, branches grew on their bodies, and they became extremely fierce. They began to attack humans insanely. Anyone bitten by them would quickly turn into a monster covered with branches. A look of horror appeared on my wife's face, but she didn't interrupt me. She just held my hand tightly. I continued to narrate. The villagers in Area C of the underground rescue center were the first to be attacked. One after another, they turned into monsters. Then, the medical area also fell. The doctors and patients all turned into zombies. Finally, the entire underground rescue center was occupied by these zombie monsters. I paused and continued. Even the tanks of the troops couldn't deal with them. They tried to use fire to burn them, but those monsters seemed to have a certain resistance to the fire. Moreover, their recovery ability is extremely strong. No matter how much damage they suffer, they can quickly recover. My wife's face became more and more terrible looking. The most terrifying thing is, I took a deep breath. I saw from the troop's surveillance screen that all the infected zombies, after losing their targets, would combine through the branches to form a huge thing like a mushroom. It still has a breathing rise and fall similar to that of a human, which is full of weirdness. My wife asked in shock, "How did you escape when it was so dangerous at that time?" I took a deep breath and said to my wife solemnly, "At that time, the troops suspected that it was the low temperature that prevented those monsters from spreading to the ground. So, after the underground rescue center was completely occupied, the zombies fell into a state similar to dormancy due to losing their attack targets." My wife looked at me in shock. "Do you mean that now that the temperature has warmed up, those zombies have come to the ground and are fighting with the station troops?" I nodded. "That's right, wife. The current situation is very serious. Even the fighter jets have been dispatched for bombing, which shows that the ground troops can no longer control the situation." My wife suddenly stood up, her voice full of urgency and panic. "Husband, we have to pack up and run away quickly. The farther the better." I shook my head sadly, held her hand tightly, and said in a low but firm voice, "Wife, it's useless. Where else can we go? According to my analysis of the disappearance of the radio station signals, similar disasters have occurred one after another in various places. No matter where we hide, we can't avoid those zombies. Now, we can only pray that the soldiers on the front line can find a way to eliminate these zombies as soon as possible." A trace of worry flashed in my wife's eyes. "But what about the child?" I was silent for a moment. A trace of helplessness flashed in my eyes, and I said softly, "Whether there is a future or not, it can only depend on the child's fate. The only thing we can do now is to let the child have more happy times as much as possible." "What does the child like to eat?" I'll go and make it for the child now. Let's have a good time as a family and enjoy this last moment, even if we die. We should be together as a family and have a full meal before we go on our way." Accompanied by the intermittent explosion sounds in the distance, I stood in the kitchen and started to get busy. These sounds seem to be constantly reminding us that the world has become more and more strange and dangerous. But at this moment, I just want to cook a sumptuous meal for my family. I opened the cabinet and started to sort out all our stock. Before the end of the world, we always saved every bite of food. But now, I don't want to save anymore. Preserved meat, canned food, dried goods, these are all the foods we stocked up on before to deal with the end of the world. Now, I'm going to take them all out and cook a doomsday feast for my family. I started to cut the preserved meat and soak the dried goods. While preparing the ingredients, I recalled the dishes that the child used to like: braised preserved meat, stir-fried dried goods, canned stewed dishes. These were all the dishes that the child used to love. I decided to make each dish as perfect as possible, so that the child could enjoy the delicious food to the fullest in this last moment. As each dish was completed, the aroma of the food filled the kitchen. I looked at the table full of dishes and felt a sense of satisfaction in my heart, accompanied by the sporadic explosion sounds in the distance. The child was woken up by us from his sleep. He rubbed his hazy eyes and looked at us with a confused expression. However, when he smelled the aroma of the food on the table, his eyes lit up immediately. "It smells so good," the child exclaimed excitedly, completely ignoring the explosion sounds outside. He couldn't wait to sit at the table and started to wolf down the food. Watching him eat so happily, a warm current welled up in my heart. Since the end of the world, we haven't eaten so extravagantly for a long time. The child had been craving it for a long time. As he ate, he smiled happily. "Eat slowly, don't choke," I reminded softly, and at the same time, I picked up a piece of braised preserved meat and put it in his bowl. Watching the child eat so happily, I felt a lot of emotions in my heart. There is nothing warmer and more important than the company of family. 5. The explosion sounds continued unceasingly and got closer. As if each sound was reminding us of the cruelty of the end of the world, the child had almost finished eating. He raised his head and there was a look of confusion in his eyes. "Dad, is that the sound of firecrackers outside? But it's not a festival now." My wife held the child's hand tightly and didn't say anything, her eyes showing deep worry. I stroked the child's head and said in a slightly heavy voice, "Well, it does sound like firecrackers, but today is not a festival. Maybe people are setting them off to drive away the bad things." "What bad things are they driving away?" the child asked curiously. I was about to answer when suddenly, an extremely strong light flashed, instantly illuminating the entire room. Immediately after, a deafening explosion sound rang out, and the ground seemed to be shaking. The child was so frightened by the sudden loud noise that he hugged me tightly. I soothed the child and then walked outside and looked towards the distance. I saw a huge mushroom cloud rising from the horizon in the distance, the orange-red firelight reflected on the sky, as if tearing the night apart. The shock wave generated by the explosion made the air tremble. Although it was far away, I could still feel the amazing energy. The night wind carried a faint smell of burnt earth, as if reminding me that this was not a distant scene but a disaster that was approaching. I couldn't help but clench my fists, and a sense of unease welled up in my heart like a tide. The terrifying power of the explosion could be felt even in this distant village. Every explosion seemed to be announcing the arrival of the end of the world. I took a deep breath and turned back to the house. Looking at the frightened eyes of the child and my wife, I forced a smile. "It's okay, it's just that there are a lot of firecrackers, and they are a bit big." However, the despair in my heart was as deep as the night. "Wife, there is still a bottle of good wine in the cellar. We were reluctant to drink it before. It has been there for years, right? Let's drink it all today." I looked at my wife, my eyes showing a kind of determination. My wife didn't say much. She turned around and went to the cellar to get the bottle of long-stored good wine. I silently took out 4 cups. My wife saw the 4 cups and asked in confusion, "4 cups? Who are you going to give the wine to? Jagger is still young. Don't let him drink it, I'll just drink with you." I shook my head and said in a deep voice, "This is a good thing. Jagger and the eldest son have never drunk it before. I don't know if there will be a chance in the future." I paused and then continued, "Pour a glass of wine for the eldest son first and let him taste it too." The eldest son left early and didn't have the chance to drink it. I turned to Jagger and said softly, "Jagger, Pour a glass of wine for your brother too. This is the first time you and your brother are drinking, you can have a drink with him first. My wife couldn't help wiping her tears and turned her head away when she heard this. Jagger was very obedient. He picked up the wine bottle, poured a glass of wine for an empty cup, and also poured a glass for himself. Jagger, pour the wine for your brother in that direction, I instructed. Jagger was very sensible. While pouring the wine on the ground, he said, "Brother, this is the wine Dad gave you. He said you haven't drunk it, have a sip." After that, he poured the wine on the ground and then raised his own glass and drank it in one gulp. "Dad, this is so spicy," Jagger shouted, his little face wrinkled into a ball. "It's good to be spicy," I said, and also raised the glass in my hand and drank it directly. Then I shouted, "Wife, don't hide, the child has grown up. Come and let the child pour you a glass of wine." "Jagger, pour a glass for your mother too. Let's have a toast as a family of three." My wife wiped her tears and came over. There was endless sadness in her eyes, but also a firm determination. Our son Jagger picked up the wine bottle and filled a glass of good wine for his mother. I took my wife's hand, placed the glass firmly in her hand, and then held her hand tightly. I looked into her eyes, took a deep breath, and then said, "Come on, let's drink this glass together as a family of three." My voice was a bit shaky, but the firmness and resolve in it were beyond doubt. My wife looked at me, and tears welled up in her eyes again, but she didn't cry out loud, she just nodded silently. The three of us raised our glasses and clinked them together. The clear sound echoed in this doomsday night. The wine slid down our throats. It was spicy with a hint of sweetness, as if it was a recollection of the good old days and an endless expectation for the future. "Jagger, what do you think of this wine?" I put down the glass and asked my son with a smile. "It's so spicy, but after drinking it, I feel warm in my heart," Jagger answered seriously. There was a faint blush on his little face due to the alcohol, and he looked particularly cute. My wife gently patted Jagger's head and said tenderly, "This is the good wine your dad has been keeping. If your brother were still here, he would drink with us today." As soon as the eldest son was mentioned, the atmosphere became a bit heavy. That child we once loved deeply, his smile, his voice, everything about him was deeply engraved in our hearts. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down my fluctuating emotions, and then looked at Jagger and my wife, and said, "Today, our family should be reunited, no matter what happens outside. At least at this moment, we are complete." The explosion sounds outside were getting closer and closer, but in this small house, the three of us sat closely together, as if everything outside had nothing to do with us. I knew that this might be the last time we were together as a family, but even so, I felt extremely satisfied and happy. "Jagger, are you afraid?" I asked softly. Jagger shook his head. "I'm not afraid as long as Mom and Dad are with me." I stroked his head and smiled. "Good boy, as long as our family is together, there's nothing to be afraid of." My wife looked at Jagger with tearful eyes, and then turned to me. Her voice was choked with sobs but full of strength. "Our family will always be together, no matter life or death." We raised our glasses again. "To our family, drink up." We sat together, quietly waiting for the arrival of the end of the world. At that moment, the aroma of the wine, the warmth of the family, and the chaotic sounds outside all seemed to be far away from us. Our hearts were only filled with each other, with this small, warm, and loving world. 6. Suddenly, several armored transport vehicles entered the village. Their arrival made the already flustered village even more chaotic. The continuous explosion sounds in the distance made everyone's nerves tense, and the appearance of the armored vehicles undoubtedly intensified this tense atmosphere. I heard the commotion outside, and a feeling of both tension and excitement welled up in my heart. The troops were here, which meant we still had a glimmer of hope of escape. I hurried outside and saw the young soldiers urgently organizing the villagers to evacuate. Their arrival made me see the hope of escape. Some young soldiers were explaining the situation to the villagers. There was anxiety and helplessness written all over their faces, since this evacuation did not allow the villagers to carry too many items. Some villagers were very unhappy and even had conflicts with the young soldiers in charge of the transfer. I watched from a distance and shook my head helplessly. These people really think the end of the world is over just because they have survived the extreme cold. They don't understand that this is just the real beginning of the end of the world. I quickly went back into the house and asked my wife and child to pack up their things quickly and follow the young soldiers to evacuate. Whether we can escape or not depends on the arrangement of fate. Soon, a young soldier came to my house. He told us eagerly that there were still half an hour before this place would be bombed indiscriminately. We only had 10 minutes to pack our personal belongings, livestock, pets, everything had to be abandoned because there was no time left. The three of us in the family quickly took action and stuffed the necessary items into our backpacks. My wife tightly hugged Jagger, and I carried the heavy backpack. Our family quickly finished packing. Under the guidance of the young soldier, we got into the armored vehicle. The armored vehicle was already full of villagers, and everyone's faces were filled with tension and unease. However, there were still some villagers outside communicating with the young soldiers. They were dissatisfied with the short time for packing their luggage. But these young soldiers couldn't stop the approaching danger. Those monsters could attack here at any time. I looked at the chaotic scene outside and was filled with helplessness and worry. Finally, several young soldiers had no choice but to give up waiting for those villagers who were still entangled. The armored vehicle started at full speed and fled towards the distance. I held my wife's and child's hands tightly and silently prayed that we could escape safely. Soon, a huge explosion sound and a dazzling flash came from behind the vehicle. I looked back and saw mushroom clouds rising in the distance. My heart was filled with horror and helplessness. The young soldier next to me saw my worry and comforted me. "Uncle, don't worry, we will do our best to protect everyone's safety." As the armored vehicle drove away at full speed, we could still feel the hot air rushing towards us. I could only silently pray that those villagers who were still entanglement about their personal belongings at that time could finally escape. In this end-of-the-world situation, we can't save everyone, especially those who can't distinguish between the important and the trivial. There's nothing we can do about them. The armored vehicle bumped on the rugged mountain road. Every bump made my heart beat faster. Jagger tightly hugged his mother's neck, and his little face was full of fear. I gently patted his back, trying to give him some comfort. The atmosphere in the vehicle was very depressive, and everyone was silent. I looked out of the window and saw that the sky in the distance was shrouded in mushroom clouds, and thick smoke was rising from the ground. This scene reminded me of those villages that had been bombed and the innocent villagers there. Thinking of them, an indescribable sadness welled up in my heart. I don't know how long it took, but the armored vehicle finally stopped. We were arranged to enter a temporary resettlement site, where many refugees had already gathered. In this difficult time, everyone comforted each other and supported one another. I looked at those tired and frightened faces and felt a lot of emotions in my heart. 7. Just when we thought we were finally safe, that familiar vibration feeling hit again. This vibration was different from the previous bombings. It was more subtle but made people feel terrified. Then, a strange sound came from underground, as if something was digging, or like thousands of claws scratching the soil at the same time. I looked around in horror and saw rats, moles, and other mammals that could dig holes swarming out of the ground in groups. These creatures were no longer the small and cute ones we used to see. They had become extremely terrifying. Their eyes were red, shining with a fierce light. All over their bodies were covered with tentacles similar to branches. These tentacles waved in the air as if searching for prey. Their bodies were huge and deformed, covered with mold spots, looking like demons crawling out of hell. What was even more disgusting was that these creatures exuded a stench, which was like a mixture of rotting corpses and sewage, making people want to vomit at the smell. Some people who didn't understand the situation, seeing these sudden monsters, were still shouting in surprise. What are these things? Their fear and confusion permeated the air. But it couldn't change the cruel reality in front of them, and I, because of my previous experience in the underground rescue center, had already recognized these zombie monsters. I didn't have time to explain, nor did I have time to hesitate. I immediately picked up the child beside me, grabbed my panicked wife, and regardless of my luggage, I rushed towards a parked armored vehicle. Behind us, the zombie monsters had already started to bite the crowd insanely. Some people were entangled by the tentacles of the zombie monsters. They struggled, but it was useless. In an instant, they were dragged underground. Only a series of shrill screams were left, piercing the silent night sky and also piercing the last trace of peace in our hearts. There was only one thought in my mind: escape, escape at all costs. Finally, we rushed to the side of the armored vehicle. I quickly opened the door, pushed my wife and child in, and then jumped in myself. Inside the armored vehicle, we were out of breath and still badly shaken. The zombie monsters outside were still raging, but the thick steel plate of the armored vehicle temporarily isolated us from the danger. I looked at my wife and child. There was fear and unease in their eyes. I held their hands tightly, trying to convey a trace of strength and comfort to them. Inside the armored vehicle, we watched the chaotic scene outside the window in horror. Filled with despair, those zombie monsters swarmed in like a tide, their tentacles waved in the air, and every wave seemed to be able to drag people into the endless darkness. We helplessly witnessed all this, with fear and despair interwoven in our hearts. Suddenly, two young soldiers appeared in the distance. They escorted several people and rushed towards the armored vehicle in a hurry. The young soldiers held weapons and bravely faced those terrifying creatures, trying to shoot them. However, there were too many zombie monsters. They swarmed in from all directions, moving quickly and cunningly, making it difficult for the young soldiers to hit the target accurately. Nevertheless, the two young soldiers still showed no fear. They fought bravely, striving to buy time for the people they were escorting to escape. Every shot was their desire for survival and their struggle against evil. With the efforts of the young soldiers, those several people finally entered the armored vehicle safely. 8. The atmosphere in the vehicle was tense and solemn. Everyone's face was filled with horror and unease, but with the addition of the young soldiers, we seemed to see a glimmer of hope. Their weapons, their courage and determination, all made us feel a little comforted. However, the attack of the zombie monsters did not stop. They insanely beat on the body of the armored vehicle, trying to break in. We nervously watched the situation outside the vehicle, silently praying that this nightmare would end soon. I saw a child being knocked down by a creature that looked like a mouse. The tentacles of that creature instantly pierced the child's chest, and blood spurted out. The child's mother let out a heartrending cry and tried to save her child, but she was knocked down by another creature. The people in the vehicle began to fall into a panic. Some people who had just squeezed into the armored vehicle, seeing the situation deteriorate, tried to jump out of the vehicle and escape. However, it was already a chaotic mess outside the vehicle, and those terrifying creatures were everywhere. In the chaos, a young soldier was unfortunately tightly entangled around the neck by a tentacle. He struggled desperately, trying to break free from the restraint, but in the end, he was mercilessly dragged underground and disappeared. I hugged my wife and child tightly, filled with fear and helplessness in my heart. I couldn't predict whether we could escape this disaster, but one thing I knew very well: I had to do my best to protect them, even if it meant paying any price. The armored vehicle seemed so vulnerable in this raging chaos, as if it could be broken through by those fierce creatures at any moment. Outside the vehicle, people's screams, the roars of the monsters, and the gunshots rose one after another, interweaving into a terrifying symphony that made people's hair stand on end. Suddenly, a tentacle stretched in through the car window, trying to grab us. I quickly picked up the machete in my hand and waved it desperately, trying to repel this tentacle. My wife tightly hugged the child and protected him with her body. After a fierce struggle, I finally managed to drive the tentacle back, but the chaos outside the vehicle still didn't stop. Instead, it intensified. I watched as some villagers were dragged underground by the zombie monsters, leaving behind only a trail of blood and terrified screams. The armored vehicle started to shake violently, as if it could overturn at any moment. We clung tightly to the handrails inside the vehicle, fearing that we would be thrown out. I felt a deep sense of despair overwhelming me. I didn't know if we could make it through this ordeal. The young soldier in the driver's seat had been captured by the monsters and vanished without a trace. The other young soldier inside the vehicle now also looked panicked, with a deep sense of helplessness and fear in his eyes. In this critical moment, without hesitation, I rushed to the driver's seat and quickly started the armored vehicle. The sound of the wheels crushing the ground mixed with the surrounding screams and roars. All I had in my mind was one thought: escape this hell, check everyone, stay away from those with wounds on their bodies. I roared at the young soldier beside me. They will soon be infected and turn into the same kind as those zombie monsters, and then attack us in turn. As I roared, I drove the armored vehicle recklessly, trying to break through the heavy siege. The vehicle shook violently with the bumps on the ground, and every impact made my heart skip a beat. However, I knew that I must not stop at this moment. Stopping meant death. At this time, the young soldier beside me gradually regained his composure and began to carefully check in the narrow compartment whether anyone was injured. I was taken aback for a moment and watched his actions, a complex emotion welling up in my heart. How should we deal with these injured people? Before I could figure it out, several people who were found to have wounds on their bodies were mercilessly thrown out of the vehicle by others. This scene made me feel a mix of emotions. Was this really the right thing to do? I didn't know, but in this life and death moment, perhaps it was better to be alive than dead. This might be human nature. 9. The young soldier initially tried to stop us from throwing the injured people out of the vehicle, but his actions enraged the crowd. In the face of the crowd's anger, the young soldier had no choice but to back down. At this time, most people suggested to me one after another, "Keep driving, get out of here first. Maybe there's still a glimmer of hope. Staying here is definitely a dead end." I examined the situation in front of me and understood that this was not the time to be bound by morality and ethics, so I gritted my teeth and made up my mind to continue driving and escape from this dangerous place. However, just as I stepped on the accelerator hard and the armored vehicle accelerated again, suddenly a huge burst of light and an explosion sound came from behind. I instinctively stepped on the brake and saw through the rearview mirror that the sky behind was illuminated red by a sea of flames. The shock wave from the explosion made the armored vehicle shake, and my heart trembled as well. "What's going on?" I exclaimed, filled with confusion and horror. "I'm not sure, but it's definitely not a good thing. We have to leave quickly," people urged anxiously, their voices revealing deep fear and unease. I also knew that this was not the time to stay. I stepped on the accelerator again, and the armored vehicle rushed forward like an arrow leaving the bow. We had to bypass the ruins and damaged vehicles one by one, trying our best to stay away from the area of the explosion. I didn't know what caused the explosion behind, nor did I know what awaited us ahead, but at this moment, escaping was our only option. During the escape, we continuously encountered attacks from those zombie monsters. They were numerous, fierce, and cruel. Every encounter put us in a perilous situation. Although the armored vehicle was sturdy, it began to be damaged under the continuous impacts and claw attacks. I drove the armored vehicle and sped on the rugged road. My eyes were firm and resolute. Whenever I encountered a group of zombies, I would charge forward without hesitation, clearing a way for our survival. "Everyone, hold on tight," I shouted, my voice full of strength and determination. Suddenly, a huge zombie pounced on the armored vehicle from the side. Its claws were as sharp as knives and scratched hard on the car window. The glass began to shatter under its powerful force, and fragments flew everywhere. Seeing this, the young soldier quickly reacted, pulled out his pistol, and fired several shots at the zombie's head. The zombie's head was instantly covered in blood and flesh, but it still didn't let go of its claws. "Push it off quickly," I shouted. Several people immediately stepped forward to help. They used all their strength and finally pushed the zombie off the car window. However, more zombies began to gather around. They roared and attacked the armored vehicle frantically. The wheels were entangled by the group of zombies, and the speed of the vehicle began to slow down. "We have to find a way to get rid of them," I said urgently. Just then, the young soldier's action shocked everyone. He resolutely jumped out of the armored vehicle, held a machine gun in his hand, and bravely opened fire on the surging group of zombies, trying to buy us a glimmer of hope for escape. His bravery and determination were like a ray of light in the darkness, allowing us people in a desperate situation to see a glimmer of hope. However, as an ordinary person, the fear and selfishness in my heart made me make a shameful choice. I accelerated the vehicle and fled far away from that dangerous place, leaving the young soldier alone there. I was filled with guilt in my heart, but the instinct for survival drove me to keep moving forward. Not long after, the sound of a grenade explosion came from behind. The sound was deafening and made my heart tremble. I seemed to see the young soldier pulling the grenade in a desperate situation and perishing together with the group of zombies in a heroic scene. His sacrifice deeply shocked and grieved me. At that moment, I realized my cowardice and selfishness. 10. Suddenly, the sky resounded with a deafening rumble, and that familiar and inspiring melody was like a ray of dawn, breaking through the haze of the apocalypse and rekindling the spark of hope in our hearts. It was the roar of armed helicopters. They were our guardians, our troops. They hadn't given up, hadn't abandoned any one of us. This perseverance and determination were like a beacon, illuminating the darkness in our hearts. I suddenly turned the car around and sped towards the direction of that hopeful roar. The scenery outside the car window flashed by rapidly, and our hearts were getting closer and closer to those heroic soldiers. The mighty armed helicopters hovered in the air like gods of war, and their precise firepower was like the scythe of death, mercilessly reaping the group of zombies below. Those zombies that had once terrified us fell in pieces like straw men being knocked down by the wind under the fury of the armed helicopters. Behind us, the more intense bombing sounds thundered like war drums. This was the large army clearing the way for us, declaring with practical actions, "You are not alone, and your heroes are here." Every explosion was like the death knell of the zombies, and at the same time, it injected the strength of steel into our hearts. Finally, on the horizon, we saw the helicopter group and the tank formation on the ground that were like dark clouds pressing down on the city. At that moment, the people in the vehicle burst into warm cheers, and excited tears and brilliant smiles intertwined into a touching picture, and I, regardless of everything, just wanted to join the large army as soon as possible and share this ecstasy of surviving a near-death experience with them. As our armored vehicle got closer and closer to the large army, an unprecedented sense of security and belonging welled up in my heart. Soldiers are not only the guardians of our country but also the guardians of our hearts. In this apocalyptic world where zombies run amok, it is they who have built a solid line of defense for our lives with their iron will and sense of responsibility. When our vehicle finally merged into the traffic flow of the large army, that never-before felt sense of peace and reassurance emerged spontaneously. Looking at the neatly arranged troops and mighty tanks outside the window, I knew that we were saved. This was the joy of survival from a desperate situation, and it was also an endless gratitude and respect for the soldiers. During our escape, a small team, fully armed, continued to escort us to evacuate from this dangerous area. Their goal was to take us to a higher altitude and colder area to ensure our safety, and the large army was like an impregnable barrier, bravely resisting the attack of the zombies and buying us precious time for retreat. Under the shelter of the military camp, an officer solemnly revealed to us the current severe situation. With the warming of the temperature, these terrifying zombie monsters had appeared one after another across the country. However, to our slight relief, the giant fusion monsters that I encountered in the underground rescue center had not appeared yet. This gave me a moment of respite. I had personally experienced the terror of those fusion monsters. They could even swallow and destroy tanks, and that terrifying power still made me shudder with fear. The officer explained that the current top priority was to evacuate the masses to the frozen soil area, because the zombie monsters would fall into a dormant state in the low temperature, and it was relatively safer there. At the same time, a more advanced shelter was also being built in full swing to provide stronger protection. Hearing this, the big stone in our hearts finally dropped. The country had not given up on us, which made us see the dawn and firmly believe that no matter what difficulties we faced, we had the possibility of victory. However, I still had doubts in my heart. Were those explosions caused by atomic bombs? Why did a mushroom cloud rise? The officer replied with a solemn expression, "This is our home country, our land. We will never use nuclear weapons on our own homeland, which would bring irreparable disasters. We used thermobaric bombs. Facing the dense tide of zombies, thermobaric bombs can instantly generate high temperatures and eliminate the zombies in the area." Subsequently, the officer admitted that although thermobaric bombs could temporarily contain the spread of the zombies, these zombies seemed to have a core parent body. As long as the parent body was not eliminated, the tide of zombies would keep coming. 11. On the way of evacuation, I witnessed countless tragic scenes and was deeply shocked inside. The shadow of the zombie monsters was everywhere, and they were like a dark plague, making people feel extremely oppressed and frightened. These terrifying creatures had invaded a large area of our country's territory like a tide. Our beautiful homeland had been divided into zombie pollution areas of different sizes by them. We were forced to pass through these areas like ghost towns. Every step forward seemed to be a brush with death, accompanied by great risks and sacrifices. During the difficult passage, the devastated war ruins were heartbreaking. The abandoned tanks were like huge, broken beasts, and the crashed fighter jets were like broken winged eagles. These silent ruins seemed to be wordlessly telling the past tragedy and struggle. The armed team was like a brave navigator, leading us to move forward carefully in the maze of ruins, facing this unprecedented disaster. Although the armed team deeply felt their own insignificance, the instinct for survival and the mission of protecting the masses on their shoulders made them unable to take a step back. As the team of evacuating masses continued to grow, the armed forces from all sides also converged like trickling streams into the sea, jointly building an iron wall to resist the current crisis. However, on a necessary road, we encountered an unprecedented challenge, a huge fusion zombie, like a moving hill. blocked our way forward and cut off our way out. This fusion zombie was simply a nightmare crawling out of hell. It was formed by the fusion of countless twisted corpses, shaped like a huge and twisted mushroom, standing in the middle of the road and exuding an unbearable stench. Its body was twisted and strange, and the corpses of various mammals were pieced together on it to form a terrifying picture. Such a huge creature, composed of zombies. Its very existence had already exceeded human imagination of horror. Facing such a monster, even the well-trained army felt helpless. Bombs could tear open cracks on its body, but the fusion zombie had an incredible recovery ability. It could quickly fill the wounds by absorbing more zombies. The speed of this recovery made us feel deeply desperate, and it seemed an impossible task to defeat it. In the face of the towering and twisted body of the fusion zombie, our planes and tanks seemed so small and powerless. I was mixed in with the evacuating masses, and my mood was extremely heavy, as if surrounded by an invisible darkness. In the air, fighter jets roared past and poured a rain of rocket projectiles on the fusion zombie. However, these attacks seemed only to arouse the anger of the monster. It roared and waved its huge arms, as if laughing at our incompetence. On the ground, the tank fire also roared like thunder, but when it hit the fusion zombie, it was like scratching an itch and could not cause any substantial damage. I watched helplessly as a fighter jet risked a low-altitude strafing but was grabbed by the huge palm of the fusion zombie. That fighter jet struggled in the hand of the zombie, like a captured bird, and finally turned into a pile of twisted scrap metal. This scene made the fear in my heart surge like a tide, but I tried my best to remain calm and encourage myself, reminding myself not to fall into the abyss of despair. At this moment, we deeply realized that conventional weapons were no longer effective against the fusion zombie. The army quickly organized us to evacuate to a safe area and urgently requested remote support from the superior. During the waiting process, the army set up strict protective measures with the highest level of vigilance to ensure our safety without the slightest flaw. At the same time, a special positioning device was installed on the fusion zombie at the risk. This device was like a bright lighthouse, guiding the way for us in the dark, ensuring that the next large-scale lethal weapon could accurately strike the target. Every minute and every second passed like an eternity. Finally, after waiting for what seemed like an endless time, we received the exciting notice. The remotely supported weapon was ready and about to launch a devastating blow to the fusion zombie. I was so nervous that I clenched my hands, filled with anticipation and apprehension. With a deafening order, the vacuum bomb fell from the sky like a heavenly soldier and accurately landed on the fusion zombie. In an instant, a dazzling white light enveloped the entire battlefield, and the deafening explosion sound made my heartbeat accelerate to the extreme. I stared nervously at the center of the explosion, looking forward to seeing the dawn of victory. When the explosion smoke gradually dissipated, I was surprised to find that the huge body of the fusion zombie had been blown to pieces. However, this victory did not come without a price. Although the army had tried its best to protect us, some people were still affected by the explosion. I looked at those fellow countrymen who were moaning in pain, and my heart ached as if cut by a knife. But just when we thought victory was in sight, a more terrifying scene occurred. Those broken zombie fragments that had been blown to pieces actually began to quickly drill into the ground, as if they were alive and agile. We watched helplessly as those fragments quickly disappeared under the ground, leaving only deep and bottomless black holes. This scene made us feel extremely horrified and scared, as if this battle was far from over. Although the fusion zombie had been severely damaged, we understood that it had not been completely eliminated. Those zombie fragments that had drilled into the ground were like lurking vipers, ready to launch an attack again at any time. Under the command of the army, we quickly and orderly passed through this former battlefield, fearing that those zombie fragments would suddenly emerge from the ground and drag us into the endless darkness. As the evacuation team continued to move forward, we finally reached the relatively safe, frozen soil area. The climate here was extremely cold, which greatly restricted the activities of the zombie monsters. I let out a sigh of relief, looking at my fellow countrymen who were tired but full of hope around me. A warm current welled up in my heart. My wife, my child, and I hugged each other tightly. After these days of suffering and danger, we finally set foot on this frozen land and obtained temporary peace and shelter. We were fortunate that we were all still alive. 12. In this frozen soil area, life gradually returned to peace and tranquility. Here, it seemed to become an oasis in the apocalypse. People busily and orderly devoted themselves to the construction of a new life. On the streets, snowplows cleared the snow to ensure smooth traffic. At the construction sites, workers operated the machinery, building new homes brick by brick. In the market, vendors were hawking various daily necessities. Although the variety could not be compared with that before the apocalypse, it was enough to meet people's daily needs. With the stability of life, some service industries before the apocalypse also gradually recovered. The most pleasant surprise was a restaurant that reopened. This restaurant was famous for its authentic cuisine before the apocalypse. Now that it had reopened, it naturally attracted a large number of diners. My wife, my child, and I couldn't help but be curious and decided to go and taste this long-lost feast. Entering the restaurant, the warm lights and tidy environment made us feel happy. We were arranged to sit at a table by the window. Outside the window was the busy street and the new urban area under construction. The dishes on the menu were not as rich as those before the apocalypse, but each dish looked so tempting. We ordered several special dishes: braised pork, steamed fish, mapo tofu, and sweet and sour spare ribs that the child loved the most. The dishes were served one after another, and the aroma was captivating. The braised pork was fat but not greasy, the steamed fish was tender and delicious, the mapo tofu was spicy and fragrant, and the sweet and sour spare ribs were crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. Our family couldn't care less about our appearance anymore and wolfed down the rare delicacies. The child ate until his mouth was full of oil, and my wife praised the dishes while tasting them. After the meal, we strolled along the street, feeling the prosperity and vitality of this land. People's faces were filled with smiles, as if they had already forgotten the haze of the apocalypse. We also blended into this busyness and joy, starting a plain yet fulfilling life. Besides daily life, we also got involved in production work, providing weapons, equipment, and various supplies for the soldiers on the front line. Here, everyone had their own responsibilities and missions, and we worked together, striving for the future of humanity. Meanwhile, a research center was established in this frozen soil area, focusing on studying the life mechanisms of zombie monsters and methods to eliminate them. Scientists worked day and night, hoping to find a way to completely wipe out these monsters. Finally, after countless sleepless nights, they achieved an unprecedented breakthrough. A mysterious virus hidden within the zombie monsters, the fusion symbiotic virus, FSV for short, was successfully isolated. At this moment, cheers erupted in the laboratory. The scientists hugged each other, with tears and smiles intertwined. They knew that this victory at this moment meant more hope and possibilities. This was a milestone achievement of Chinese scientists in the field of virus research. It not only demonstrated the country's scientific research strength but also provided a powerful weapon for all of humanity to fight against zombie monsters. The successful isolation of FSV laid a solid foundation for subsequent scientific research, enabling researchers to launch a more targeted attack on this virus. Subsequently, good news also came one after another in the vaccine research and development. Scientists made significant breakthroughs in the development of the fusion symbiotic virus inhibitor, FSVI for short. This new inhibitor showed a powerful inhibitory effect on the FSV virus. After strict laboratory tests, FSVI quickly entered the clinical trial stage. This exciting news spread rapidly throughout the frozen soil area. Like a spring breeze, people shared the news with each other, and their faces were filled with long, lost smiles. They seemed to see the dawn of victory. Feeling that the hope of defeating the zombie monsters was gradually becoming a reality, scientists, with their wisdom and sweat, brought a glimmer of life to people and also brought warm sunshine to this land once shrouded in haze. 13. Just when people were immersed in the beautiful vision and the approaching joy of returning to their homes, the doomsday judgment suddenly arrived. On that last day, the sun was shining brightly, and the warm rays gently fell on the body. It should have been a moment that made people feel warm and comfortable. However, this tranquility was ruthlessly broken by the ear-piercing alarm sound that suddenly rang in the city. I looked up at the sky and saw flames soaring into the sky, as if countless meteors were crazily cutting through the sky. The scene was astonishing, but at that moment, I clearly realized that this was not a good omen. Those meteors were falling with the power of destruction at an incredible speed, making people feel terrified. I stared blankly at this terrifying celestial phenomenon, and an inexplicable fear welled up from the bottom of my heart. Suddenly, a deafening explosion sound rang out, as if a roar from heaven and earth. it made people's hearts race and their blood surge. The entire sky was instantly dyed red by the flames. The fire was like a violent fire dragon, dancing wantonly between heaven and earth, as if the sun had fallen to the ground, blazing and dazzling. A huge mushroom cloud rose into the sky. It was like an angry behemoth, breaking through the ground and soaring into the clouds. The color of this mushroom cloud was rich in layers, from the deep black smoke to the orange, red flames, and then to the rolling gray clouds at the top. It was as if it was a symbol of the anger of nature. Its volume continued to expand, as if it was going to break through the sky, demonstrating the terrifying power of nuclear weapons. Just as this shocking scene had not yet subsided, the second, the third, countless meteors carried the power of destruction and rushed towards the ground from the sky. They were like messengers of death. Each time they fell, it was accompanied by an earth-shattering and a towering fire. These meteors exploded one after another, and each explosion set off new smoke and fire. As if they were going to swallow the entire world in endless destruction, I tightly hugged my child and my wife. Our bodies were trembling under the huge shock wave, as if we could be destroyed by this invisible force at any time. The air was filled with the smell of burning and some indescribable special odors. These odors were mixed together, making people feel extremely heavy and oppressed. I looked up and saw that the originally blue sky had been completely covered by thick smoke, leaving only sporadic flames flickering in the darkness. That fire was like the lantern of death. Swaying in this world on the verge of destruction, each flicker seemed to be announcing the coming of the end of the world. Each fire represented a devastating blow, and each blow made this land tremble. We seemed to be on the edge of a world on the verge of collapse, helplessly and fearfully watching all this happen. As the explosions continued one after another, the surrounding temperature rose sharply. I gradually felt that the burning sensation on my skin became more and more intense. As if I was being roasted by an invisible high-temperature fire, I felt that I could be melted by this intense heat at any time. My child and my wife also clung tightly to me. The sweat on our bodies poured out like a rainstorm, but in this almost crazy high temperature, the sweat evaporated as soon as it flowed out, leaving only crystallized salt grains sticking tightly to our skin. I knew very well that at this moment, we were experiencing an unprecedented disaster in human history. Those nuclear weapons that we had only seen in movies in the past were now wreaking havoc in the sky above us, bringing indescribable fear and despair. I couldn't explore the reasons behind this disaster, nor did I know when it would finally end. The only thing I was sure of was that our family was at a critical moment of life and death. However, at this moment when our lives were hanging by a thread, an unusual calm welled up in my heart miraculously. Perhaps it was because I understood that no matter life or death, our family's hearts would always be closely connected. I turned to look at my wife and child. I also saw firmness and courage in their eyes. We held each other's hands tightly, as if we could still draw a precious warmth and strength from each other's support and company on the edge of this doomsday. As another round of deafening explosion sounds rang out, the entire ground began to shake violently. As if the earth's crust was angry and trembling, I felt the ground under my feet shaking uneasily, as if it could crack at any time. An irresistible shock wave swept over, mercilessly shaking everything around. I tightly hugged my child and my wife, doing my best to build a protective barrier for them, trying to resist the merciless invasion of this shock wave. However, in the face of this destructive force, we seemed so vulnerable, like a leaf in a violent storm, ready to be blown away at any time. Just then, a dazzling fire light fell from the sky like a meteor, and its target was directly at us. The intense light made me unable to look directly. I tightly closed my eyes and silently recited the names of my family members in my heart, hoping that at this most critical moment, I could connect with them spiritually and face this unknown fate together. The firelight enveloped us in an instant, and the high temperature seemed to melt everything. I felt the intense pain on my skin, as if being burned by a fierce fire. My consciousness also began to become blurred. However, at this edge of life and death, my mind was unusually clear, and the happy times our family had flashed through my mind. Those warm pictures flashed by quickly like a slideshow, the child's laughter, my wife's gentle eyes, every festival we spent together. These precious memories filled my heart with gratitude, even when facing the threat of death. I knew that our family was still closely connected. This deep family affection and love would always remain unbreakable no matter when and where. Finally, the firelight dissipated, and the surroundings turned to ashes. but the feelings of our family were forever engraved in our hearts. On the verge of the survival of humanity, we found true happiness and inner peace at the last moment. Life and death, separation and reunion, our hearts were still closely connected. This emotional bond was indestructible. The end of the full text. Note 1. Chronology of events. In 20XX, a sudden and strong electromagnetic storm swept across the globe, interfering with the global power system and causing large-scale power outages worldwide. At the same time, an FSV virus leakage incident occurred in country M. And this virus was subsequently deliberately spread globally by the mysterious organization, Shadow Council, in the same year, affected by unknown factors. The global temperature dropped sharply, entering an extremely cold state. The temperature in many regions dropped below -100 degrees Celsius, and the living environment became extremely harsh. In 20XX, in order to deal with the severe cold and ensure the safety of people's lives, our country began to orderly transfer the people to the underground rescue centers, built in various places. In 20XX, a sudden rat infestation broke out in Area C of the underground rescue center, in City X. A large number of rats poured in, posing a serious threat to the residents in the center. Within a few weeks, the rat infestation became more and more serious, and even attacks by unknown creatures occurred. These creatures were fierce in behavior, highly aggressive, and contagious. They were called zombies by the people. The zombies quickly destroyed Area C and then occupied the entire underground rescue center. In 20XX, in line with its responsibility to all of humanity, our country publicly disclosed the detailed information of the disaster that occurred in the Underground Rescue Center, in City X at the Global Alliance Conference and called on all countries to strengthen cooperation to jointly deal with this unprecedented challenge. However, in 20XX, our country was misunderstood and slandered by the international community. It was wrongly accused of being the source of the disaster and was required to take responsibility for this global crisis. At the same time, the incident in Area C of the Underground Rescue Center, in City X was officially named the Epic Catastrophe by the International Alliance. In 20XX, with the gradual deepening of the investigation, similar incidents of unknown biological disasters were also exposed in countries such as Country M, Country E, and Country F, and these incidents occurred earlier. This discovery confirmed that the disaster was global and also indicated that our country was not the source of this disaster. By 20XX, the global temperature began to gradually warm up, and the zombies that had originally lurked underground began to appear on the ground more frequently, posing an even greater threat to human survival. In order to meet this new challenge, in 20XX, our country actively took measures and paid a huge price to build a safe human habitat in the permafrost area to protect the people from the threat of zombies. In the same year, a political upheaval occurred in Country M. The Shadow Council successfully overthrew the original regime and established a new country called the Holy State. In 20XX, our country made a major breakthrough in scientific research. The FSV virus was successfully isolated from the zombies, and the FSVI vaccine entered the clinical trial stage. This achievement gave people hope of returning to their homes and rebuilding society. However, in 20XX, the situation in Country E deteriorated sharply. The entire country was occupied by zombies, and the number of survivors was unknown. What was even more serious was that in 20XX, the Doomsday Judgment System in Country E detected a serious environmental anomaly and automatically activated and launched the Global Indiscriminate Nuclear Strike Program. In order to defend themselves, various countries were forced to activate their nuclear counter-strike systems, and the world was plunged into a devastating nuclear war. The consequences of the nuclear war were catastrophic. In 20XX, the world entered a nuclear winter, and the climate and environment suffered unprecedented damage due to the influence of nuclear radiation. The FSV virus mutated again, evolving into a more powerful strain. Note 2I. Relevant files of the Doomsday Judgment System, research and development background. The research and development of the Doomsday Judgment System originated from the long-standing tense relations and arms race between Country E and its neighboring countries, especially after the neighboring countries carried out continuous modernization upgrades of their nuclear arsenals. Country E felt that its nuclear deterrence might be challenged. In order to ensure that a nuclear counter strike could still be effectively carried out after the national leadership lost its command ability due to unexpected events. Country E began to design this system. Operating mechanism 1. Normal dormancy. Under normal circumstances, the doomsday judgment system remains dormant to save resources and reduce the risk of misoperation. 2. Activation and monitoring. Once the international situation becomes tense or the system senses potential threats, the senior management of Country E will activate the system. After activation, the system will continuously monitor the radiation level, abnormal vibrations, and possible nuclear explosion signs within the country through sensors set up across the country. 3. Communication and judgment. If the system detects signs of a nuclear weapon attack, it will first try to establish communication with the Strategic Command Center of Country E. If the communication remains stable and receives instructions within the preset time, the system will consider that the leadership is still in effective command and automatically return to the dormant state. If the communication is interrupted or no instructions are received within the specified time, the system will trigger the nuclear counter, strike mechanism, decision, making and launch process. The decision-making process of the Doomsday Judgment System depends on an advanced computer decision-making system and a wide-range sensor network. The system will comprehensively judge whether a nuclear strike has actually been suffered based on the collected data. In an extreme crisis situation, the system will broadcast the launch command to all intercontinental missiles and nuclear-powered submarines equipped with nuclear warheads in the country through a special communication protocol to carry out an automatic nuclear counter strike. 2. The terrifying scene of the activation of the Doomsday Judgment System. Global nuclear conflict risk. If the Doomsday Judgment System is activated and judges that the leadership of Country E is incapacitated, the system will automatically launch nuclear warheads at the preset targets. This situation is extremely likely to trigger a global-scale nuclear conflict, and the consequences will be catastrophic and incalculable. Irrevocable nuclear counter strike. Because the system is designed to be completely automated, once the nuclear counter strike procedure is triggered, even if it is later discovered that it is a misjudgment, it cannot be stopped. Such a misjudgment may lead to an unnecessary nuclear disaster, global panic and social unrest. If the system is really activated and a nuclear counter strike is carried out, it will trigger huge psychological panic and social unrest on a global scale. People will face a direct threat to their survival, and social order may collapse as a result. Long-term impact on international relations. After a nuclear conflict occurs, international relations will be deeply affected. Trust between countries may break down, leading to long-term tension and opposition, and may even trigger new regional or global conflicts. This impact may last for decades or even longer. 3. The relationship between the Doomsday Judgment System and the Shadow Council. The infiltration and influence of the Shadow Council. 1. Infiltration in the scientific community. The scientific community of Country E has been successfully infiltrated by the Shadow Council. This mysterious organization, through various means, including misdirection, inducement, and manipulation, has prompted the scientists of Country E to establish the Doomsday Judgment System. 2. The original intention of establishing the system. The senior management of Country E originally supported the establishment of this system for the purpose of deterring hostile major powers. Their original intention was not to really activate this system but to use it as a strategic deterrent. 3. Controlled by the Shadow Council. However, when the Doomsday Judgment System was established, it actually got out of the control of Country E and fell into the hands of the Shadow Council. The Shadow Council used this system as a key link in its global plan. The global plan of the Shadow Council. 1. Triggering turmoil and conflict. The very existence of the Doomsday Judgment System is a huge risk. The Shadow Council uses the instability of the global situation and the tense relations between major powers to try to trigger greater turmoil and conflict. In this case, the Doomsday Judgment System is extremely likely to be activated, thus triggering a global-scale nuclear conflict. 2. Connection with the fusion symbiotic virus, FSV. The plan of the Shadow Council is not limited to the Doomsday Judgment System. They are also related to the fusion symbiotic virus, FSV for short, which is another link in the global population reduction plan. Through the dual blows of the virus and nuclear conflict, the Shadow Council tries to achieve its global goals. 3. The ambition to establish the holy state. the ultimate goal of the Shadow Council is to establish a holy state under their control, and the establishment of the doomsday judgment system, as well as the possible global turmoil and conflict triggered by it, are all important steps for them to achieve this ambition. By creating chaos and crises, the Shadow Council tries to reshape the world order so that they can play a more important role in it. Current situation and warning. 1. Global scale turmoil, with the disclosure of the existence of the doomsday judgment system and the gradual emergence of the conspiracy of the Shadow Council, greater turmoil and unease have emerged on a global scale. Governments and international organizations of all countries need to be highly vigilant and take effective measures to deal with this severe challenge. 2. The responsibility and reflection of the scientific community. Scientists also need to deeply reflect on their role and responsibility in the establishment process of the doomsday judgment system. They should be more vigilant against the infiltration and influence of external forces and ensure that the development of science and technology can truly benefit humanity instead of becoming a tool for some conspiracy groups. Note 3. Vaccine files. Vaccine name: Fusion Symbiotic Virus Inhibitor, FSVI for short. Vaccine description. 1. Basic characteristics. FSVI is an artificially modified virus that is harmless to the human body. It is not pathogenic but can stimulate the human immune system to produce a specific response to FSV. 2. Mechanism of action. FSVI is designed to be able to recognize the specific antigens of FSV and compete with FSV for binding sites on human cells. By occupying these binding sites, FSVI prevents FSV from entering human cells, thus blocking the process of FSV infecting and replicating within the human body. Development process. Scientists first conducted in-depth research on the structure and genetic information of FSV. Through a large number of experiments and simulations, they screened out a series of potential viral fragments with specific binding ability to FSV. These fragments were then further modified and optimized to create FSVI. After that, FSV underwent multiple rounds of in vitro testing in the laboratory to verify its safety and effectiveness. Only after passing these strict tests did it enter the clinical trial stage. Clinical trial stages. Phase 1. In this stage, a small number of healthy volunteers were selected to test the safety of FSV. The main purpose was to observe whether there were any adverse reactions after vaccination, such as allergic reactions, fever, or other abnormal symptoms. At the same time, the pharmacokinetic properties of FSVI in the human body were also studied, including how the vaccine was absorbed, distributed, metabolized, and excreted. Phase 2. A larger number of volunteers, including those with a certain risk of FSV exposure, were involved in this stage. The effectiveness of FSVI was further evaluated. Scientists compared the antibody levels and immune responses of vaccinated volunteers with those of the control group, who received a placebo, to determine whether FSVI could effectively stimulate the immune system to produce antibodies against FSV. Phase 3. This was a large-scale, multi-center clinical trial. Volunteers from different regions and backgrounds were included to comprehensively assess the safety and effectiveness of FSVI in a more realistic environment. The results of this stage would determine whether FSVI could be approved for widespread use. Potential challenges. Mutations of FSV. FSV is a highly mutable virus. As the virus mutates, the binding sites that FSVI targets may change, reducing the effectiveness of the vaccine. Scientists need to continuously monitor the evolution of FSV and adjust the formula of FSVI accordingly. Immune evasion. Some individuals may have a weakened immune response to FSVI due to genetic or other factors. In these cases, the vaccine may not be able to effectively protect them from FSV infection. Research is ongoing to find ways to enhance the immune response in these individuals. Production and distribution. Producing FSVI on a large scale requires advanced technology and facilities. Ensuring the quality and stability of the vaccine during production and distribution is also a major challenge. In addition, distributing the vaccine to all regions in need in a timely manner is also a complex task that requires the cooperation of multiple parties.